The divine being gazes down at the world she holds in her hands, a silent witness to the environmental decay wrought by mankind. She decrees that a trial must be endured, a test of worthiness for a species that has forgotten its place. Because of this divine ultimatum, dungeons began to manifest across the globe, threatening to erase humanity unless they could prove their strength. The young man stands resolute, aware that failure to achieve results in these treacherous depths means the end of his kind. Amidst the towering structures of the city, the energetic girl beams with pride as she displays the mark on the back of her hand. She exclaims that she has finally become an explorer, her excitement drawing the attention of those around her, including the dark-haired youth who watches with a mix of admiration and quiet contemplation. In response to her joy, the arrogant student with the spiked hair leans in close to the young man, his voice dripping with condescension. He scoffs at the idea of a level 0 attempting to follow such a path, reflecting the harsh reality of a world where the emergence of dungeons has birthed a society ruled by the law of the jungle, where only the strong are deemed to have value. The news of her new status ripples through the air, met with a shocked exclamation. He erupts into a fit of cruel laughter, his face contorted with mockery as he points at the quiet youth. He ridicules the very notion of someone so powerless even dreaming of becoming an explorer, while the young man can only look away, absorbing the weight of the insults. Continuing his verbal assault, the bully reminds him of his absolute lack of potential, labeling him a level 0 with the lowest possible rank. He sneers at the impossibility of the world's weakest individual ever setting foot inside a dungeon, leaving the young man to face the harsh truth of his current stand. He remains stoic as the spiky-haired student continues his verbal assault. While the bully shouts in disbelief at his lack of progress, he quietly reflects that although his level hasn't increased yet, he feels a change is coming. He had endured this treatment for years, which was exactly why he had chosen this high school, far from his hometown. He had hoped to escape the constant whispers and isolation that came with being a level 0, seeking a fresh start where no one knew his history. His hopes for anonymity are shattered as the bully bellows for everyone to hear, mocking the perpetual level 0 for even showing his face. The cruel laughter draws the eyes of every student in the vicinity, making his status public knowledge once again and crushing his desire to blend in. Seeking a distraction from the humiliation, he turns his gaze toward the sky, where a massive airship displays the daily Explorer rankings. The sight is a stark reminder of the world's obsession with power and the vast distance between him and those at the top. He knows that these rankings are based on performance within the dungeons, and those in the top 100 are treated like national heroes. As he walks, he acknowledges the harsh reality. Dungeons are lethal, and no party would ever risk taking a level 0 like him into such danger. Suddenly, a flash of silver catches his eye as a girl with long, shimmering hair passes by, her presence momentarily cutting through his dark thoughts. It is Kaguya, and her presence immediately shifts the atmosphere of the hallway. Students whisper in awe, recognizing her as a top-tier talent, an S-rank student whose potential is already legendary among the student body. To his absolute shock, he finds her sitting directly beside him in the classroom. He can hardly believe his luck, or perhaps his misfortune, as the most famous student in school takes the seat right next to the weakest student in the room. The teacher calls for introductions, and she rises with a grace that commands the entire room. She introduces herself as Kaguya Hinata, her voice calm and steady, while he feels the weight of dozens of envious and confused stares directed at their corner of the room. When it is his turn, he stands abruptly, his nerves getting the better of him. He stammers out his name, Amain Rin, while the rest of the class erupts into hushed gossip, wondering why a level 0 is sitting anywhere near a prodigy like her. He stands before the imposing structure of the academy's dormitory, a modern complex that will serve as his new home during his studies. Upon entering, he is greeted by the dorm manager, Kiyono, who welcomes him warmly to the facility. She hands him a thick rulebook, emphasizing the importance of following the dormitory's regulations while he resides there, and he politely accepts the responsibility. After settling into his new quarters, he checks the time and remembers the scheduled social gathering for the residents. He decides to head down to the cafeteria to meet his fellow students, hoping to establish some early connections. In the bustling cafeteria, a pair of friendly students approach him, suggesting they form a party since they are all newcomers with similar goals. They seem eager to collaborate and eventually ask him what rank he was assigned during his evaluation. The atmosphere shifts instantly when he quietly admits his rank is F. The two students recoil in visible shock, their previous enthusiasm replaced by utter disbelief at such a low designation. They begin to whisper and question how he even gained admission to an institution that prides itself on scouting high-potential explorers. He remains silent, the weight of their scrutiny pressing down on him as they wonder if there was some mistake in his enrollment given the school's elite standards. His hand tightens around his water glass, the tension in his knuckles betraying his internal frustration. One of the students notes his gloves, speculating that he wears them specifically to hide the low-rank license on his wrist from public view. In this society, the ranking system is an absolute measure of a human's innate potential, determined at the moment of birth. From the elite S rank down to the bottom-tier F rank, these labels are believed to dictate one's entire future as an explorer. Despite their initial shock, the students try to offer some hollow comfort, suggesting that an F rank doesn't strictly forbid him from being active, even if he can never reach the heights of an S rank. However, a different realization strikes him. While potential is a fixed ceiling, the actual level one achieves through effort is the true measure of strength. They continue to encourage him, insisting that hard work might eventually lead to a breakthrough. even mentioning rare rumors of F-ranks who found success. He listens to their well-meaning words, but his focus has already shifted toward the path of leveling up, regardless of his starting point. He stares blankly, the weight of his F-rank status pressing down on him. Even though he knew it was coming, the reality of being at the very bottom is a bitter pill to swallow. Sitting on the edge of his bed, the young man stares at the digital display in disbelief. While most students begin their journey at level 1, he is forced to start from absolute zero. A notification chirps on his phone, pulling him from his dark thoughts. It's a message from Arisu, full of youthful optimism and encouragement, reminding him that she's working hard at her own school and cheering him on. He collapses back onto his pillow, shielding his eyes from the light as he reflects on his original goal. The desire to provide a better life for his mother and sister was his driving force, but now that dream feels like it's slipping through his fingers. Suddenly, he bolts upright, his expression hardening with a new, fierce resolve. He refuses to let a letter grade or a starting number define his future. If the only way to grow is to defeat monsters, then that is exactly what he will do. Clad in his academy uniform, he stands before the yawning, rocky entrance of E-Rank Dungeon 117. He repeats his vow not to give up, his gaze fixed intently on the dark path ahead. Before he can cross the threshold, a staff member stops him to offer a final word of caution. She reminds him that for an explorer, survival is the only thing that truly matters, and urges him not to push his luck in the pursuit of strength. He offers a sharp, determined nod in response, acknowledging the danger. With a map in hand and his resolve steeled, he prepares to take his first real step into the world of dungeons. Approaching the registration desk inside the facility, he feels a momentary flicker of hesitation. He looks around the quiet, sterile lobby, wondering if anyone else is brave, or perhaps foolish, enough to be starting here today. The receptionist, a bright-eyed young woman with messy blonde hair, greets him with a mix of surprise and professional courtesy. She asks if this is his first foray into a dungeon, noting his pristine academy uniform as she prepares to process his official license. She is frantically searching for his license, her movements a blur of nervous energy as she realizes the necessary documents are missing from their usual place. After a moment of searching, she presents a smooth, translucent crystal orb, explaining that it is a tool used to measure an explorer's latent potential through the manifestation of color. He reaches out and places his hand upon the sphere, only for it to instantly drain of all light, turning a deep, abyssal black that mirrors the sudden shock in his eyes. This void seems to pulse with a malevolent energy, threatening to consume him as he realizes this total darkness is the physical manifestation of his level 0 status and his complete lack of inherent ability. Suddenly, the shadows erupt from the orb, dragging him into a pitch-black vortex while he cries out in confusion, wondering why this terrifying phenomenon is happening to him alone. Moments later, the receptionist returns with his official documents in hand, only to find the room empty and her client vanished without a trace, leaving her calling out into the silence. Meanwhile, he is plummeting through a chaotic rift of swirling energy, his voice lost to the wind as he struggles to make sense of the sudden, violent descent. The fall seems endless, a terrifying plunge into a silent, lightless chasm that swallows his very silhouette. He eventually hits the ground with a heavy thud, gasping for air as he looks around a desolate, moonlit landscape dominated by a distant, ominous castle. As he stands, a shimmering notification appears before him, announcing that he has successfully entered a skill dungeon, leaving him reeling from the impossible turn of events. He gazes around the dark, oppressive woods of the skill dungeon, his mind racing with confusion. As he questions the nature of this place, a disembodied, clinical voice echoes in his mind, announcing that he has acquired the perimeter search skill, further deepening the mystery of his sudden arrival. Suddenly, a wave of intense physical distress washes over him, forcing him to double over and cough violently, as if the very air has turned to poison. Amidst his gasping, the mysterious voice returns, informing him that his current hardship has granted him a minor resistance to abnormal statuses. He collapses to his knees, sweat pouring down his face as he struggles to comprehend the agony racking his body. The sheer intensity of the environment seems to be actively attacking his constitution, leaving him barely able to whisper a question about what is happening to him. The agony intensifies, pinning him to the cold ground as he reaches out a trembling hand in a desperate, silent plea for aid. The voice in his head remains indifferent, announcing that his resistance has already evolved to a medium level to combat the encroaching toxicity of the dungeon. He lies motionless, his consciousness flickering like a dying candle as he whispers a final, broken call for help. In rapid succession, the unseen force reports the lightning-fast evolution of his abilities, surging from large to extra-large resistance before finally culminating in a total immunity to all status ailments. A spectral interface manifests in the void, documenting the harrowing transformation he has just endured. It lists his newly forged capabilities, from the tactical advantage of perimeter mapping to the absolute nullification of the very forces that nearly claimed his life. He jolts awake, eyes wide with a sudden, sharp realization. One moment he was in the safety of a room, and the next, the cold reality of a dark, unfamiliar forest closes in around him. He stumbles back, his breath hitching as he tries to make sense of the impossible transition. Still reeling from the shock, he stares at a translucent screen that has manifested before him. It lists a series of passive skills, including resistances to abnormalities and status ailments, along with something called dungeon information. He mutters to himself, questioning the nature of these skills that seem more like something out of a game than reality, wondering how he could have acquired them without even knowing. He begins to navigate the dense woods, guided by a holographic map that provides a strange, top-down perspective of his surroundings. He notes with a grim sort of fascination that his status includes absolute resistance to both poison and paralysis, realizing that without these boons, his situation would be far more dire. For now, his priority is simple: find an exit and reach safety. As the shadows deepen, a new notification informs him that he has gained the night vision skill, causing the murky woods to suddenly sharpen into clarity. He recalls reading that dungeons are often riddled with traps, and the realization that he might be trapped in an E-rank dungeon, or perhaps something even worse, sends a chill down his spine. The path leads him to a small, still pool of water nestled among the gray rocks and twisted roots. He rushes toward the water's edge, his movements fueled by a desperate, parching thirst. Despite having a skill that resists hunger, his throat feels like dry parchment, and the sight of the pond feels like a divine reprieve in this hostile environment. He cups his hands, lifting the cool liquid to his lips while noting a strange, shimmering hue to the water, which he dismisses as a side effect of his newly acquired night vision. With a shrug of resignation, he takes a deep, hopeful gulp. The liquid hits his tongue with a foul, bitter tang that makes his entire face contort in disgust. He gags, the wretched taste lingering as he realizes that whatever he just consumed was far from pure. Suddenly, a notification flashes, announcing that his stamina recovery skill has evolved from medium to large due to the ingestion of a hazardous substance. He recoils from the pond, the terrifying truth dawning on him. The water was lethal, and it was only his passive resistances that prevented a swift, agonizing death. He stares in disbelief at the puddle, the realization hitting him like a physical blow that the liquid he just consumed was nothing less than lethal poison. Wiping his brow, he acknowledges that his status abnormality nullification has once again pulled him back from the brink of death. He chastises himself for underestimating the dungeon's lethality, vowing to proceed with far greater caution from this point forward. The young man begins to navigate the treacherous, rocky terrain, his footsteps echoing through the oppressive silence of the cavernous environment. After what feels like hours of trekking through the gloom, he pauses to catch his breath, his mind racing as he searches for any sign of an exit in the seemingly endless labyrinth. A nagging thought crosses his mind regarding his unauthorized presence here without a license, but the internal debate is cut short by a sudden, chilling sensation. His heart hammers against his ribs as an overwhelming presence manifests just out of sight, signaling that he is no longer alone. Looming directly behind him, a colossal reptilian predator bares its jagged teeth, its breath hot against the back of his neck. He spins around, his face pale with terror as he confronts the nightmare-made flesh, struggling to process the sheer scale of the creature before him. His mind frantically cycles through possibilities, wondering if this is a floor boss or perhaps one of the legendary irregulars, monsters of such rarity and power that they defy standard classification. Attempting to remain calm, he begins a slow, measured retreat, hoping the beast will lose interest, but the moment their eyes lock, he knows his presence has been fully acknowledged. The monster erupts into a deafening roar and lunges forward, sending him into a desperate, panicked sprint as he screams in terror, the reality of his dire situation finally sinking in. He scrambled away, the ground trembling beneath the weight of the massive beast's claws. As he fled, he shouted into the air, acknowledging the obvious peril that didn't need to be stated. Because of the immediate threat, his latent abilities began to surge, and a realization struck him. His speed was increasing, evolving from a mere boost to something far more significant as he pushed his body to its limits. The creature lunged, its massive jaws snapping just inches from his heels, forcing a desperate cry from his throat as he realized how close death truly was. As he tore through the thick undergrowth, his speed continued its rapid evolution, reaching levels he had never imagined possible, each step carrying him further than the last. He pushed even harder, his movements becoming a blur as his speed reached a transcendent state, fueling a flicker of hope that he might actually outrun the predator. Moments later, he burst into a dense forest, but the realization quickly dawned on him that even with his incredible speed, the terrain offered little advantage against such a relentless hunter. The monster loomed over him once more, its dark, scaled form casting a long shadow as it cornered him among the trees. He stood frozen, chest heaving and sweat pouring down his face, his mind racing for any possible way to survive this encounter. The young man stands alone in the clearing, dwarfed by the massive, scaled predator looming before him. The air is thick with tension as the beast lets out a low, guttural growl, its predatory gaze locked onto its prey. He grits his teeth, sweat beading on his forehead as he weighs his options. While the urge to flee is strong, a realization strikes him. If he fights this creature, he might gain the skills he desperately needs to survive in this world. With a sudden surge of resolve, he lets out a defiant roar, convincing himself that he has a chance to win if he pushes past his limits. In response to his challenge, the monster unhinges its jaw, revealing rows of jagged teeth in a deafening roar that shakes the very ground. Despite the paralyzing fear creeping up his spine, the youth refuses to back down, bracing himself for the inevitable clash. The creature suddenly lunges, its massive weight crashing down where he stood only moments before. He watches with narrowed eyes, tracking the beast's every movement as the impact sends a cloud of dust and debris into the air, signaling the start of a desperate struggle. He then throws himself forward, becoming a blur of motion as he navigates the treacherous terrain to close the distance. Narrowly avoiding a lethal swipe from the monster's claws, he ducks and weaves through the assault, Every instinct is pushed to the limit as he searches for an opening in the creature's thick, armored hide, his movements driven by pure adrenaline. After the intense exchange, he finds himself gasping for air, his lungs burning from the exertion. The monster remains relentless, its predatory gaze fixed on its exhausted prey as the physical toll of the battle begins to mount. He suddenly feels a surge of new information as a notification flashes in his mind, informing him that the extreme danger has triggered a new skill, Endurance Up. This unexpected boon gives him a flicker of hope, leading him to believe that if he can just drag this out into a battle of attrition, he might actually survive the encounter. He pauses, noticing a sudden change in the beast's behavior as it stops its relentless pursuit. Confusion sets in as he wonders why the predator has suddenly hesitated, questioning if it has finally grown tired of the chase. His heart sinks as he looks down, realizing his foot has plunged into a dark, bubbling liquid. The realization hits him with icy clarity. He has wandered right into a lethal poison pond, turning his moment of hope into a new, deadly crisis. He stares at his hands, dripping with the toxic liquid, as a sudden realization dawning on him. While he stands knee-deep in the lethal pond, the massive predator remains at the shore, pacing warily and refusing to enter the water. Seeing the beast's hesitation, he splashes the dark water toward it. The creature recoils instantly, its predatory confidence replaced by a primal fear of the very substance that was meant to be his end. With a desperate roar, he lunges forward, using the momentum of the splashing poison to drive the monster back. The creature shrieks as the toxic droplets sear its hide, confirming his suspicion. Even a monster of this magnitude is vulnerable to the dungeon's environmental hazards. He presses the advantage, his movements a blur of frantic energy as he hurls more of the corrosive liquid at the flailing beast. With one final, guttural cry, he delivers a massive wave of the poison, engulfing the predator in a terminal spray. As the mist clears, the once mighty creature dissolves into dark particles, leaving him alone in the silence of the cavern. He catches his breath, recalling the warnings from the dungeon primer about the lethality of these waters, a danger he managed to turn into a weapon. Suddenly, a translucent screen flickers into existence before his eyes, announcing the acquisition of a new skill, Monster Dismantling. He stares at the notification, surprised to find such a utility listed as an active ability. The interface expands, detailing the distinction between his constant passive buffs and this new, manual technique. Steeling himself, he reaches out toward the fading remains of his foe, determined to put this new power to the test immediately. He stands in awe before the sheer volume of materials harvested from the fallen beast, the scale of his victory finally sinking in. Examining the remains, he notes the high quality of the bones and hide, realizing they could be forged into powerful magic weapons or sold for a significant sum to the guild. Beside the pile, he discovers a magic stone of unusual size, far exceeding the small fragments typically found in such low-level areas, which usually only drop stones a few centimeters wide. However, the problem of transport quickly becomes apparent as he stares at the mountain of loot. Knowing he cannot possibly carry it all back to the surface on his own, he finds himself wishing for a magical bag or a specialized skill to manage the burden, contemplating the limitations of his current gear and the missed opportunity if he leaves this behind. In that moment of need, a sudden flash of insight grants him exactly what he desired: the awakening of a new active skill known as extra-dimensional storage. A translucent interface manifests before him, cataloging his spoils with clinical precision, hundreds of bones and hides, along with the singular, precious magic stone, all neatly organized. Testing his new ability, he finds he can summon and store items with a mere thought, marveling at the efficiency of the instantaneous process as a massive bone vanishes and reappears at his command. He then attempts to store the toxic water from the nearby pond, but discovers the skill has its limits, as the liquid remains beyond his reach, suggesting the storage is reserved for solid objects or recognized loot. Accepting this restriction, he turns his gaze toward the depths of the dungeon, ready to venture further into the unknown now that his burden has been lifted. He stands over the fallen beast, his gaze heavy with the weight of the struggle. Despite the overwhelming power of the reptilian horror lying motionless before him, he had somehow found a way to prevail, though the victory feels hollow against the questions still burning in his mind. His fist trembles slightly as a bitter truth echoes in his thoughts. No matter what he achieves, or how many monsters he slays, anything multiplied by 0 remains 0. The frustration of his stagnant growth manifests in the tight, white-knuckled grip of his hand against his side. Turning his back on the sight of his victory, the young warrior begins to walk away, the harsh reality of his situation settling in. Even after defeating an irregular monster that should have granted immense experience, his level has not budged. It remains firmly at 0. The man stands in the dim light of a cavern, facing a group of small, horned creatures that resemble rabbits. He tries to navigate the rocky terrain quietly, questioning if these are indeed monsters, but a sudden misstep alerts the creatures to his presence. The small beasts turn in unison, their eyes locking onto him as they prepare to spring forward. Realizing he has walked straight into a trap, he is forced to leap and weave through the air as the pack lunges at him from all sides. As he dodges, he notes that compared to the terrifying speed of the reptilian monster he faced before, these creatures seem to move in slow motion. He realizes that his super speed ability is making the world around him crawl, turning the monster's frantic attacks into predictable, sluggish movements. With a surge of confidence, he clenches his fist and prepares to counterattack, spotting a clear opening in their formation. He strikes out, but even with his enhanced perception, he He finds himself adjusting to the sheer velocity of his own movements as the creatures struggle to keep up. He begins a rapid-fire assault, his fists becoming a blur as he strikes down the horned rabbits one by one with rhythmic precision. He lets out a determined shout, fully embracing the flow of combat as he continues to clear the cavern of the small threats. He strikes down the last of the horned rabbits with a decisive blow. A notification manifests in his mind, announcing that his repeated strikes have earned him a new skill, bare-handed combat enhancement. This revelation fills him with a surge of adrenaline. He exclaims that he's been waiting for this, confirming his theory that skills can be acquired through raw experience and effort, not just divine intervention. He continues his assault, his movements becoming more fluid as he realizes that hard work truly pays off. As the battle rages on, he enters a state of flow, systematically dismantling the remaining monsters. More notifications chime in his consciousness. His combat skill evolves into martial arts, and he develops resistances to both poison and paralysis. Though his numerical level remains unchanged, he feels his physical form becoming lighter and more responsive than ever before. He pauses for a brief moment, catching his breath as he considers the implications of his progress. He knows that if he falters against these low-level foes, he would only be a liability to any future party in more treacherous dungeons. Clenching his fist with renewed resolve, he vows to accumulate as many skills as possible. He refuses to be the weak link, determined to transform himself into a capable adventurer through sheer persistence. A fierce shout of determination escapes him as he pushes forward. He is driven by a singular desire to prove that hard work can truly bear fruit, and he intends to embody that truth through his own actions. The echoes of his battle fade into the damp air of the cavern, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. The jagged rock walls stand as silent witnesses to his solitary struggle. He turns his attention to the spoils of his victory, examining a glowing magic stone held in his palm. A translucent display reveals a significant haul of meat, bones, and hides, noting that this particular stone is larger and more valuable than the ones described in his introductory guides. Deciding to prioritize his survival, he tucks the loot away and sets his sights on the path leading out. For now, his only goal is to make it back safely with the resources he has gathered. He breaks into a sprint toward the light of the exit, but his heart suddenly hammers against his ribs. A massive, reptilian eye looms in the shadows, and he realizes with a jolt of terror that he has just encountered his first true monster, an irregular far beyond the level of a simple rabbit. He is filled with a new sense of purpose, shouting his resolve to the world as he reflects on the path he has finally chosen to take. Across from him, the receptionist stares with an intensity that matches his own, her eyes wide and unblinking as she processes his sudden outburst. Suddenly, the silence of the guild hall is shattered as she lets out a piercing, high-pitched scream that echoes off the walls, her composure completely vanishing. The force of her own outburst sends her reeling backward, nearly tumbling over as she gasps for air, while he stands there, utterly bewildered by her extreme reaction. She recovers quickly, slamming her hands onto the counter with a loud bang and scolding him for sneaking up on her without making a sound, prompting a sheepish apology from the young man. After catching her breath, she leans in closer, squinting as she realizes he is the same student who had visited the dungeon the previous day and never checked back in. She expresses genuine shock that he survived, noting that he had been missing for an entire day. The revelation hits him hard, as he realizes he must have been unconscious in that cave for much longer than he thought. Shifting back to her professional duties, she asks if he possesses an adventurer's license, and upon learning he doesn't, she insists that he register immediately for his own safety and to track his progress. She produces a heavy, ornate box with a crest on the front, instructing him to place his hand inside so they can officially measure his current level and status. As he complies, a dark, swirling energy erupts from the device, and the receptionist's face pales in disbelief as the readout confirms the impossible. Despite his ordeal and the monsters he faced, his level remains at 0. He looks down at the back of his hand, where a distinct, dark mark has manifested, the proof of his new status. Seeing the mark, the receptionist offers her enthusiastic congratulations, declaring him an official explorer at last. He considers the implications. Even if he can only handle E-rank dungeons for now, the income from selling small magic stones will help support his family and allow him to buy gifts for his sister, making the struggle worthwhile. With a surge of resolve, he clenches his gloved fist and offers a sincere word of thanks, his eyes bright with newfound hope. High above the city, a massive airship drifts through the clouds as a public announcement blares across the district. The voice over the speakers excitedly proclaims that the latest rankings have been updated, revealing a shocking development. A brand new explorer has seized the #1 spot, though the announcer notes with confusion that the individual's name is listed simply as unknown. Watching the vessel from a balcony, he muses on the impossibility of reaching such heights himself. While the idea of being #1 is alluring, he remains focused simply on achieving a stable life through his work, wondering if his name will ever grace such a prestigious list. While he remains grounded, the news of this unknown entity begins to ripple through the academy, sparking excitement in some like Arisu, while others, like the arrogant student with the spiked hair, can only stare in silent, frustrated disbelief at the shifting status quo. While they grapple with the news, the true source of the mystery remains hidden in plain sight. Even those closest to the truth, like Kagaya, remain in the dark as he continues on his way with a quiet smile, completely oblivious to the fact that he is the very legend the world is now searching for. The young explorer, Hinata Suzuki, arrives at the local shopping center. Having recently defied the odds by clearing a beginner's dungeon despite his lowly F rank and level 0 status, he has come to trade the spoils of his first successful foray into the depths. He stares in disbelief at the appraisal terminal, his eyes wide with shock. The screen displays a frustrating message. The magic stone he presented is of rank X and cannot be appraised by standard means. He demands to know why such a result is even possible. As the crystalline object sits motionless on the scanner, the terminal offers no further explanation, simply stating that the item cannot be sold at this location. It directs him to a specialized consultation center for rare items, leaving him at a loss. Frustration mounts as he attempts to scan other materials, but the results are the same. Whether it is unknown skin or mysterious bones, the machine repeatedly flashes the same refusal, leaving him to cry out in exasperation at the string of failures. He looks down at a small, unremarkable stone held between his fingers, his brow furrowed in thought. He begins to wonder if the machine itself is malfunctioning, or if the rest of his collection is simply too insignificant to register. Suddenly, the display flickers to life with a staggering figure. 300,000 yen for a single special magic stone. The bold numbers dominate the screen, signaling a massive windfall. He is nearly overwhelmed by the sight, his face contorting in a mix of shock and realization. He hadn't expected a rare rabbit's magic stone to be so valuable, and he quickly decides to sell only one to avoid drawing unwanted attention to himself. With a soft beep, the transaction is finalized, leaving him with a small fortune and several stones still in his possession. He sighs, the weight of the day's events finally catching up to him as he stands before the imposing facade of the academy. The exhaustion is palpable, a lingering reminder of the trials he faced within the dungeon's depths. As he approaches, a familiar figure looks up, her eyes widening in sudden recognition. She pauses her work, a soft exclamation escaping her lips at the sight of his return. He immediately offers a humble apology, explaining that his absence was due to an unexpected overnight stay within the dungeon. She listens patiently, her expression softening into a warm smile as she welcomes him home, acknowledging the mischievous nature of his sudden disappearance. She confirms her trust without hesitation but gently urges him to prioritize his safety, reminding him that no achievement is worth risking his life. He is taken aback by her genuine concern, feeling a sense of relief that his story was accepted so readily. Her gaze then drifts to the state of his uniform, noting the thick layers of grime and dust clinging to the fabric. He looks down, suddenly self-conscious of his disheveled appearance, while she insists that he must wash up immediately to rid himself of the dungeon's filth. She then offers a sincere word of praise, officially addressing him as an explorer. The title catches him off guard, his eyes widening in shock before a genuine, joyful smile breaks across his face at the formal recognition of his new status. She watches as he bows deeply in gratitude, his voice thick with emotion as he thanks her for her kindness. The realization that he has finally achieved his goal of becoming an explorer begins to truly sink in as he stands in the courtyard. He reflects on the unexpected warmth of her smile, but a voice from behind breaks his train of thought. A fellow student approaches, eyeing the significant stains on his jacket with a mix of curiosity and concern, asking if he has just returned from Adele. The newcomer introduces himself with a friendly wink as Hiroto Fuji, offering a hand in greeting. He responds in kind, introducing himself as Hinata Suzuki, while the other boy explains that everyone gets a bit messy when they're first starting out as explorers. Their conversation turns to the specifics of the excursion, with Hiroto expressing genuine surprise when he learns that the novice ventured into the E-rank Dungeon 117. He admits that while it was a difficult experience, he managed to return safely, earning a look of impressed respect from his new acquaintance. He recoils in disbelief, his eyes wide as he questions the sheer recklessness of venturing into an E-rank dungeon alone. He insists that even for such a low rank, a group is always the safer choice for a novice. Despite admitting his own lack of strength, he offers a warm smile and suggests that they team up next time. He believes that together, they could manage the dangers of an E-rank dungeon more effectively. Touched by the gesture, the young explorer reflects on his companion's kindness, quietly hoping that one day, he too can be of use to someone so genuine and supportive. As another day at the academy concludes, the peaceful atmosphere is shattered when a familiar, imposing figure looms over him. It is Guy, a ghost from his past, who mockingly addresses him by his old rank and demands he follow for a private word. The two walk down the long, sterile hallway of the school, the distance between them filled with an unspoken, heavy tension that echoes through the empty corridor. To the boy, this man was once a symbol of pure terror, a high school classmate who viewed him with nothing but contempt and never hesitated to use physical violence to enforce his dominance. Stopping in his tracks, the bully turns with a sneer, his voice dripping with false camaraderie as he wonders aloud if even a level 0 could be rewarded for putting in enough effort. Without warning, he lunges forward, his massive fist cutting through the air with violent intent as he declares the start of their session. But as the blow approaches, a strange realization washes over the young man. The once terrifying strike now appears to move with the agonizing slowness of a dream, leaving him plenty of time to react. With a fluid, effortless motion, he slips past the punch, leaving his aggressor stumbling forward in a state of utter shock and confusion at how his target could have possibly vanished from his line of sight. He watched the fist approach with a detached clarity, noting that even the monsters in the E-rank dungeon moved with more lethality than this once feared bully. Guy's frustration boiled over into a desperate shout as his attack swung wide, meeting only empty air. The young man realized with a start that he could now track every muscle twitch and shift in weight, his perception of time slowing to a crawl. Behind him, the brute could only gasp in disbelief as his target vanished from his line of sight. A sudden, sharp blur of motion cut through the air, a testament to a speed that defied normal human limits. Before the aggressor could even process the miss, Hinata was already positioned at his flank, his movements fluid and effortless. The shock on the larger man's face was absolute, his mind unable to reconcile the level 0 weakling with the phantom now standing beside him. The confrontation was abruptly interrupted by a bone-chilling drop in temperature that caused Hinata to shiver, a strange notification echoing in his mind about acquiring resistance to the cold. Nayu stepped forward, her icy gaze enough to halt the bully in his tracks, while Guy demanded to know why she was interfering. Watching from the sidelines, Hiroto marveled at the transformation in his friend, having never seen him display such poise or power. Defeated and humiliated, Guy retreated with a final, bitter vow of vengeance, leaving the tension thick in the air. She remained silent, her eyes like frozen pools of steel, radiating an aura of untouchable authority and hidden depth. Left in the wake of her departure, the protagonist stood bewildered, wondering if he should have offered an apology for the chaos. His companion could only offer a wry observation about the complexity of a woman's heart, leaving him even more confused. Suddenly, a violent surge of frigid energy swept across the area, catching everyone off guard as the environment itself seemed to turn hostile. He braced himself against the biting frost, his feet skidding on the suddenly slick ground, as another mental alert confirmed his growing resistance to the sub-zero temperatures. Amidst the swirling white, he questioned if this sudden elemental shift was a deliberate assault or something far more ancient. He shudders as an unnatural chill pierces through him, a cold so intense it feels like a physical weight. He realizes with a jolt of terror that without his newly acquired resistance, the mere presence of this frost would have been fatal. His mind races, struggling to understand why Nayu has appeared in the midst of this frozen chaos. Desperate to escape the biting temperature, he scrambles for a way out, his teeth chattering uncontrollably. He cannot fathom why she is directing such hostility toward him, but the instinct for survival overrides his confusion. He refuses to let his life end here. Steeling his resolve, he prepares to meet the onslaught, his eyes narrowing with a fierce determination. He concludes that regardless of her reasons, he has no choice but to fight back and defend himself. As he moves to counter, the air between them crackles with tension, yet her expression is not one of malice, but of profound, trembling distress. Suddenly, the aggression vanishes, replaced by a flood of tears as she begins to sob uncontrollably, her voice breaking as she offers a desperate apology. He stands frozen, his own shock mirroring her sudden emotional collapse. She continues to weep, confessing through her gasps that she was simply too terrified to function, her body shaking with the weight of her own fear. He can only watch in stunned silence, the transition from a deadly threat to a vulnerable girl leaving him completely bewildered. Amidst her tears, she looks at him with a dawning realization, sensing something fundamentally different about his nature. He remains rooted to the spot, trying to process the rapid shift in the atmosphere while she struggles to regain her composure. Unbeknownst to those around him, he has spent his life masked by the label of a level 0, a facade that has successfully hidden his true, immense power from teachers and peers alike. Nearby, Hiroto watches the aftermath in disbelief, unable to comprehend how someone like Hinata could have the audacity to provoke a formidable opponent like Guy. It is then revealed that in her moment of pure, unadulterated panic, she had inadvertently triggered her S-rank latent ability, the blessing of the Ice God, unleashing a power far beyond her conscious control. She struggles to maintain her composure, her hand trembling as the glowing mark of the Ice God pulses with a volatile energy. This power is a constant burden, a freezing force that threatens to leak out and harm anyone nearby the moment her concentration wavers. She watches the young man with a mix of awe and confusion, realizing that despite perceiving her as a threat, he withstood her direct attack without succumbing to the frost. His resilience is unlike anything she has ever encountered. The weight of her isolation and the terrifying nature of her own abilities finally take their toll, leaving her feeling small and vulnerable amidst the icy shards of her unintended outburst. The fear of death, or perhaps the fear of what she might become, becomes overwhelming. Panic flickers in her eyes as she searches for a way to regain control, her breath hitching in her throat. The uncertainty of her next move leaves her paralyzed by indecision. Her internal turmoil is broken when he approaches, his voice soft and filled with genuine concern as he asks if she was frightened or if someone had treated her poorly. Even his companion watches from a distance, baffled by the sudden shift in the atmosphere. Through choked sobs, she explains the heavy burden of her lineage, revealing that her hesitation to strike was born from the fear of releasing the full, destructive power of the kami. He listens in stunned silence, the gravity of her situation finally sinking in. He lets out a long, weary sigh, his initial wariness replaced by a deep sense of empathy for the girl's plight. Moving closer, he prepares to offer whatever comfort he can to ease her distress. He gently reaches out with a handkerchief, dabbing away the tears that stain her cheeks. The simple, tender gesture catches her completely off guard, causing a faint blush to creep across her face. Overwhelmed by a sense of responsibility for the misunderstanding, he stammers out a sincere apology, insisting that the fault lies entirely with him. He desperately asks if there is anything at all he can do to make things right. She offers a quiet word of thanks, her confusion growing as she looks at him. She wonders why this person, whom she had viewed as a rival or a threat, is showing her such unexpected and selfless kindness. She lowers her gaze, a deep flush creeping across her cheeks as she processes the boy's unexpected warmth. Beside her, he nods firmly, his silent gesture reinforcing the sincerity of his words and the new bond forming between them. Having established this fragile trust, he takes a breath and poses a question that hangs heavy in the air. He asks if she would be willing to grant him a favor, a request that leaves her startled and the future of their alliance uncertain. As their journey reaches this new plateau, the internal resonance of their experiences manifests in a surge of growth. A list of newly acquired capabilities appears: mastery over nearby objects, the ability to repair items, and a vast array of passive resistances, including a newfound immunity to the very cold that once defined her isolation. Hinata is caught completely off guard by a sudden request, his face a mask of pure bewilderment. His friend leans in, whispering urgently that if the Ice Princess herself is asking for a favor, he has no choice but to agree, adding that making a girl cry is an unforgivable offense. Neyu offers a simple, solemn nod, confirming the importance of the plea. Feeling the pressure, Hinata finally relents and agrees to help, earning a quiet, sincere word of thanks from her. With the agreement made, the two set off together down a wide, paved walkway. The campus around them is quiet and modern, with trees and benches lining the path as they walk in a companionable, if slightly awkward, silence. As they walk, he finds himself contemplating her legendary status as an S-rank explorer. He wonders if her famously stoic demeanor is actually a form of self-imposed discipline, a way to keep the overwhelming power of the ice god in check so she doesn't accidentally freeze everything in her path. The realization that she lives in the campus dorms hits him with a start, causing him to let out a surprised exclamation. When they reach a fork in the path, he offers a hasty, somewhat clumsy goodbye, watching as she prepares to head toward her residence. She bids him a soft farewell, her expression remaining calm as she turns to leave. However, the moment she is out of earshot, his friend begins to shout at him, appalled that he would let a girl walk back to her dorm alone instead of showing the basic courtesy of escorting her to her door. Later that evening, he sits alone in a quiet area, nursing a drink and replaying the day's events in his head. He feels a deep sense of uncertainty, questioning if he handled the situation correctly and lamenting his total lack of experience in talking to girls who aren't his own sister. His brooding is suddenly shattered by a cheerful, high-pitched greeting as a girl with short, messy hair appears out of nowhere. She startles him by presenting a tray piled high with an incredible amount of food, cheerfully asking if she can join him before immediately diving into her meal with a joyful exclamation. She eats with a ferocity that defies her small stature, her cheeks bulging as she stuffs herself with food. He can only stare in amazement, wondering how such a tiny person could possibly have such a bottomless pit for a stomach. She leans forward, her eyes narrowing as she accuses him of treating her like a small, defenseless animal. Hinata can't help but compare her to a fluffy puppy in his mind, though he keeps the thought to himself as he tries to maintain his composure. Because of his silence, she probes further, asking if something is weighing on his mind. He tries to assert his masculinity, but she dismisses his protest as rude while continuing to eat with a blunt honesty that catches him off guard. Moments later, he clarifies his intentions, explaining that since they share the same dormitory, it only felt right to escort her home. She listens intently, though she seems to find his earnestness about understanding the complexities of a woman's heart somewhat comical. He goes on to cite his sister's influence, repeating her firm belief that a girl should never be left to walk alone and must be accompanied until the very end. His companion is taken aback by the rigidness of these instructions, questioning if he's merely mimicking a script he was taught. In response, she offers a different perspective, suggesting that while his sister's advice is sound, the girl's own wishes are what truly matter. This simple truth hits him like a physical blow, shattering his previous assumptions about social etiquette. The realization leaves him reeling, his hands flying to his hair in a fit of intense embarrassment. He agonizes over the possibility that he forced his company on Neyu, feeling the sting of a massive misunderstanding that makes him want to disappear. Seeing his distress, she offers a sympathetic smile, noting that her own sister shares similar views on the intricacies of the female heart. She advises him that instead of assuming, he should simply ask for permission next time. As they step out into the evening air, she muses that she and his sister would likely be kindred spirits. He retorts with a protective edge, making it clear he isn't ready to share his sister with anyone just yet, even a new friend. The scene shifts to a private training hall where he meets Neyu for their scheduled session. She is poised to begin, but as she prepares to unleash her power, she suddenly halts, her expression shifting from focus to pure, unadulterated shock. She remains frozen, her gaze locked onto him with an intensity that borders on a glare. She struggles to find her words, her usual composure crumbling as she tries to process a sudden, internal realization that seems to have paralyzed her. She declares her resolve with a fierce intensity, her voice echoing through the training hall as she vows to master the power known as the protection of the ice god. The young man stands frozen by her sudden outburst, watching as she remains rooted to her spot, her silhouette small against the vast floor of the arena. She repeats her demand for more, her voice trembling but firm. Her face flushes a deep crimson as she screams for him to continue, pleading for him to keep his eyes locked onto hers without turning away. He finally understands the weight of her request, recalling how the crushing pressure of another's glare had once overwhelmed her. This training is her way of building resistance to that very weakness. With a determined nod, he accepts the challenge, promising to push forward as she offers a quiet, breathless word of gratitude. Their eyes meet in a silent, grueling battle of wills. Her gaze is sharp and focused despite the heat rising to her cheeks, while he struggles to maintain the necessary intensity, driven by a singular desire to help her overcome the barrier holding her back. The tension snaps when he suddenly averts his eyes and offers a hasty apology, prompting her to tilt her head in confusion and ask if he could provide a truly intimidating stare. He narrows his eyes, channeling a cold, piercing aura that immediately causes her to groan under the sheer weight of his presence. As his gaze sharpens into a terrifying glare, the pressure becomes physical, forcing her to gasp and stumble as the invisible force of his will threatens to crush her resolve. He rushes to her side the moment she falters, finding her slumped on the floor, breathless and flushed, as she wonders aloud if his strength has grown exponentially in just a single day. She listens intently as he explains the strange nature of his growth, noting that despite acquiring numerous skills the previous day, his actual level remains unchanged. Because of the emotional weight of their training, she offers a soft apology for her tears, but he quickly waves it off, insisting the fault was entirely his own. This kindness puzzles her, leading him to reveal that his protective instincts stem from having a younger sister of his own, which makes him feel a deep sense of responsibility whenever he causes a girl distress. Now that the stifling cold no longer grips her heart, she has become far more expressiveness, her face lighting up with a vibrant, playful energy that was previously hidden. Watching her, he feels a flicker of admiration mixed with a touch of envy, moved by the courageous way she is confronting her past traumas. However, the physical evidence of their session remains, with thick layers of frost and jagged icicles still clinging to every surface of the training hall. As he surveys the frozen wreckage, a new understanding dawns on him. The difficulty of the task has granted him the ability to melt ice, yet he remains unsure if it will be enough to clear the room. He realizes that this is no ordinary frost, but the protection of the ice god, meaning it won't thaw naturally, and his unauthorized use of the facility might draw the ire of the student council. Determined to spare her from further scrutiny or rumors regarding the unusable room, he searches for a way to fix the situation himself. With a sudden surge of effort, his power shifts and refines, evolving into a far more potent form of absolute disintegration that leaves him reeling in shock. He stares in disbelief at the empty space where the indestructible ice once stood, wondering if it truly melted or simply ceased to exist under the weight of his new power, absolute ice disintegration. Beside him, Najii is equally frozen in shock, her eyes wide as she witnesses the impossible. Breaking the silence, he turns to her with a relieved grin, suggesting that with the obstacle gone, they can finally make their way home without any further trouble. While he stands there in awe, she can only stare at the spot, her mind racing as she whispers to herself that such a feat should be impossible. The sheer scale of what he just accomplished defies everything she knows about her own family's magic, leaving her questioning the very nature of his abilities. As they step out into the school courtyard together, the pair immediately draws the attention of passing students. Whispers ripple through the crowd, with onlookers marveling at the sight of the legendary Ice Princess walking alongside a seemingly ordinary boy, sparking rumors of a new party formation. Reaching the edge of the campus, she offers a polite farewell, addressing him as Suzuki-kun as she prepares to head her own way. He stops her suddenly, calling out Kenny-san, with a sense of urgency that makes her pause and look back, her expression one of quiet curiosity. He rubs the back of his neck, his face flushing as he tentatively offers to walk her the rest of the way home. He quickly adds that it's fine if she'd rather not, worrying that his presence might cause misunderstandings or, worse, trigger the trauma she's been carrying. He tries to reassure her that he doesn't want to be a burden, but simply wants to ensure she gets back safely. With a gentle, sincere smile, he explains that he feels a sense of duty to see things through and wants to take full responsibility for her well-being until the end. His earnestness is clear, showing a side of him that is deeply protective and committed to her safety. His offer sends a wave of heat to her cheeks, contrasting sharply with the lingering memory of the biting cold that usually haunts her. She trembles slightly, her voice barely a whisper as she struggles to find the words to accept, pleading softly for him to stay by her side. Recalling his promise that his new skill would shield her from the freezing depths of her own power, she finds the courage to nod. The memory of his determination to stop the cold gives her the strength to finally say yes, trusting in his ability to protect her. She ducks her head, her face a deep crimson as she softly thanks him for his kindness. He is equally flustered, his own face heating up as he stammers a humble response, both of them caught in the awkward, sweet tension of the moment as they realize the depth of their connection. Together, they begin the walk toward her home, the evening sun casting long shadows behind them. As they move in sync down the quiet street, the icy barriers that once stood between them continue to thaw, replaced by a new, burgeoning warmth as the distance between them begins to melt. The status screen manifests, detailing the formidable array of abilities now at his disposal. Under the Fate and Active Skills categories, new entries appear alongside established ones like Otherworld Storage and Demon Dismantling. Most striking is the Passive Skills section, which now includes Absolute Ice Disintegration and an exhaustive list of resistances, ranging from hunger and status abnormalities to extreme cold and fear. Several days had passed since the training began. Hinata made his way toward the grounds, reflecting on the grueling routine that had, quite literally, brought tears to his companion's eyes every single day. He watched Najii, who was surprisingly cheerful despite the hardships. While she assured him there was no need for concern, He couldn't help but feel a sense of inadequacy, wondering if he was truly living up to the expectations of a man in her eyes, or what his own sister might think of the situation. As their session concluded, she reached out, her gloved hand a symbol of their growing partnership. With a soft word of gratitude, she promised to join him again the following day, cementing their bond through shared effort. The setting soon shifted to the imposing gates of the Kimui estate, where a sudden realization struck him with the force of a physical blow. Standing before him was a woman of quiet elegance, who introduced herself as Irina, the mother of the girl he had been training with. She greeted him with a knowing smile, mentioning that her daughter had spoken of him often. Caught off guard by the formal introduction, he stammered out his own name, his nerves clearly getting the better of him in the presence of such a refined figure. However, the atmosphere took a sharp, intimidating turn as the matriarch began preparing a meal with terrifying intensity. As she brandished a blade with practiced precision, he found himself paralyzed by a sudden, irrational fear that his very fingers might be at risk, wondering if this was a typical reception in such a household. Despite the tension, the sharp rhythm of the knife eventually gave way to the quiet clatter of a teacup being placed upon a wooden surface. He was led into a spacious, traditional room and encouraged to make himself comfortable while waiting for the young lady of the house. Though the surroundings were peaceful, he remained on edge, his posture stiff as he tried to reconcile the hospitality with the earlier display of culinary aggression. His internal monologue was abruptly interrupted by a voice from directly behind him, belonging to an elderly man who seemed to have appeared out of thin air. The shock of the encounter triggered a sudden sharpening of his senses, a new instinct for detecting the unseen taking root within him as the old man chuckled at his startled reaction. He continues to stare with an intensity that makes the young man squirm, his gaze piercing through any attempt at a casual facade. When the boy dares to wonder if age is finally catching up to the elder, the old man snaps back with surprising vigor, asserting that he is far from past his prime. His unwavering gaze forces a strange sensation to wash over the youth, as if a barrier is forming within his mind. The young man is startled to realize he has developed a resistance to mental intrusion, a direct result of the internal crisis the old man's scrutiny provoked. He is left bewildered as the elder bursts into a boisterous laugh, clapping his hands and praising the boy for having a sharp eye. The sudden shift from intimidation to approval leaves the young guest struggling to keep up with the old man's erratic energy. As the elder's laughter fades, the sliding doors open to reveal the young lady of the house, transformed by a stunning, light-toned kimono that flows elegantly around her. She approaches with a shy grace, asking if the attire suits her, while the boy can only stare in wide-eyed silence, overwhelmed by her presence. She leads him into a quiet, traditional room where the atmosphere is thick with unspoken tension, choosing a seat directly by his side. He finds himself paralyzed by nerves, his throat going dry as he desperately sips at his tea to maintain some semblance of composure. The proximity is baffling. In any other formal setting, they would be separated by the table, yet here she is, close enough for him to feel the heat of her presence. He is encouraged to relax as she speaks softly, but her words have the opposite effect. As he struggles with the overwhelming scent of her perfume and the sheer awkwardness of the situation, his body reacts to the stress, manifesting yet another strange ability to process the physical toll of his anxiety. He is momentarily distracted from the suffocating closeness by the arrival of the matriarch with a fresh tray of tea. She offers a polite apology for the delay, her calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the internal turmoil the young man is currently enduring. However, her expression soon shifts, a sharp and knowing glint appearing in her eyes as she declares that it is time to begin their true business, ending the pleasantries. With a sudden click, she throws open a large, dark box, its contents hidden but clearly significant, causing the young man to recoil in genuine terror as he wonders what ordeal awaits him. Irina offers Hinata an exclusive Kimui family credit card, telling him to use it as much as he likes. He stares at the card in disbelief, his mind reeling at the sight of such a prestigious item and the sudden weight of the family's trust. Nayu immediately protests, turning to her mother to declare that this was never part of their arrangement. Meanwhile, he is paralyzed by the thought of what this could mean for his family's struggling finances, realizing he could finally provide for them without limit. She continues her outburst, demanding to know why her mother is suddenly being so generous when her usual behavior consists of nothing but cold, distant glares. The confusion in her voice is palpable as she struggles to reconcile this new warmth with years of neglect. In response, the older woman simply smiles through a veil of tears, her expression softening with a maternal warmth that seems long forgotten. She muses aloud about how many years it has been since they last had a genuine argument like this, her tone nostalgic despite the tension. The simple act of disagreement feels like a breakthrough in their frozen relationship. He watches the exchange, stunned to learn that their relationship has been strained for so long, and asks if the girl he knows from school is truly the same person at home. The revelation that they haven't spoken like this in years deeply unsettles him. A sudden realization strikes him as he connects the dots. The reason she pushes herself to the point of exhaustion every day is simply to earn a single moment of connection with her mother. Her hard work wasn't for glory, but for a chance to be seen. He sinks back, overwhelmed by the weight of his own ignorance regarding her private struggles. He admits to himself that he truly knew nothing about the burden she was carrying. The mother then drops to her knees in a formal bow, her voice trembling as she begs him to help them maintain these precious moments of family life. She pleads for him to give them the time they need to be a family again. Looking at her tear-streaked face, he understands his role, If his unique skills can negate the protection of the ice god, he can finally buy the time she needs to be with her mother. He resolves to use his power to bridge the gap between them. He sits across from the two women, his head bowed slightly as he delivers a difficult refusal. He explains that while he appreciates the offer, he simply cannot accept the proposal they've laid out. This decision stems from a deep-seated principle. He refuses to let his connection with Najii be defined by financial transactions. He struggles to find the right words, his gaze shifting between the mother and daughter as he emphasizes that money should not be the foundation of their bond. Rising from his seat with a sudden burst of conviction, he makes his stance clear. The credit card will remain untouched. However, he quickly follows this with a fervent promise to do everything in his power to support Nayiu's hard work and daily struggles. His voice rings out with unwavering determination as he declares his intent to repay her through his own strength and resolve, rather than through a borrowed fortune. This passionate outburst leaves Nayiu momentarily stunned, her eyes wide and a faint flush creeping across her cheeks as she processes the weight of his words. Seeing the sincerity in his eyes, Irina's initial shock softens into a hopeful inquiry, asking if this means he intends to truly be there for her daughter from this moment forward. The intensity of the moment breaks slightly as he offers a sheepish grin, scratching the back of his head while admitting that he is willing, provided that Nayiu herself is in agreement. The room becomes a flurry of emotion as Irina excitedly presses the issue, while Nayiu, completely overwhelmed by the turn of events, buries her face in her hands to hide her deepening blush. The lighthearted atmosphere is shattered instantly when he senses a sudden, chilling shift in the air. He shouts Nayiu's name and bolts toward the sliding doors, his instincts screaming that something is wrong. As he reaches the threshold, a strange realization takes hold. A new power, a water seal, manifests within him to meet the rising crisis. He realizes with growing dread that if the temperature continues to plummet, the entire mansion will be encased in ice. He watches her retreating figure as she flees down the long corridor, his hand outstretched for a moment before he hesitates, unsure if he should pursue. Deciding it might be best to let her go for now, he remains still, his gaze fixed on her back as she disappears around a corner, though his mind is filled with concern. A sudden, sharp movement echoes through the quiet mansion as he changes his mind and decides to follow, slipping through the shadows with newfound purpose. As he crosses the threshold of a heavy gate, a strange realization washes over him. He has mastered the art of moving unseen, his presence becoming an absolute shadow. Ahead, she stands trembling, unaware of his silent approach. She eventually collapses to the floor, her strength failing as the weight of her emotions takes hold. He steps out from the darkness, calling her name softly to avoid startling her further. Startled by his sudden presence, she gasps in surprise, her eyes wide with shock as she looks up at him. He quickly offers an apology, explaining that his worry for her well-being wouldn't allow him to stay away. Tears stream down her face as she pours out her heart, lamenting the cruel fate that prevents her from interacting with others or even touching another soul due to the divine protection of the ice god she carries. He listens intently before offering a handkerchief, admitting that he felt responsible for her tears from their very first meeting. He confesses that watching her tireless dedication every day had become a source of inspiration for him, describing her efforts as dazzling. With a gentle smile, he tells her that he has come to realize his true desire, to stand by her side and share his life with someone as remarkable as she is, regardless of the challenges they might face. Overwhelmed by his words, she weeps with relief, explaining how long she has endured the isolation of her touchless existence. Now, finally, she feels a sense of profound happiness as she reaches out, her fingers trembling with hope. She smiles through her tears, her voice a soft whisper of gratitude as she finally feels the warmth of another's presence after so long in isolation. Because of this newfound connection, she pulls him into a tight embrace, while he can only offer a flustered, happy smile in return, his face flushing at the sudden intimacy. Suddenly, the tender moment is shattered by the arrival of the eccentric shopkeeper, who seems overwhelmed by a sudden, inexplicable heat, fanning himself frantically. Startled by his boisterous entrance, the pair leaps apart as the old man and a young classmate look on in utter confusion at the scene they've stumbled upon. He immediately begins prying, demanding to know how the young man managed to withstand the freezing aura of the ice god's protection, leading to a hesitant explanation about the use of a specific skill. As the conversation turns toward the nature of his abilities, the weight of his level 0 status hangs in the air, a stark contrast to the incredible power he just displayed to protect his companion. The elder remains cryptic, refusing to divulge his secrets even as he notes with surprise the boy's unusual resistance to his own aura of intimidation, which usually cows most men. Shifting his focus, the old man points directly at the girl, revealing the shocking truth that she is actually his granddaughter, much to the disbelief of the onlookers. Before anyone can process this, he bellows a command for them to marry, sending the girl fleeing in a panic while the boy gains a new defensive skill born purely of the terror the old man inspires. Eventually, the group makes their way back to the safety of the mansion, where they are greeted by the familiar, welcoming presence of the caretaker who has been waiting for their return. Akira stands tall, arms crossed, and formally introduces himself as Kemui Akira, Hinata's father. The revelation strikes Hinata like a physical blow, leaving him stammering in shock, while Irina warmly welcomes her father home. He remains frozen for a moment, the weight of his return and the sight of his daughter's radiant smile almost too much to bear. He had heard rumors of this development, but seeing it in person is a different matter entirely. He suddenly breaks the tension by boisterously thanking Hinata, his voice booming through the room. The young man can only offer a flustered response, caught off guard by the patriarch's sudden intensity. He then joins his wife and daughter, his laughter filling the air as he confesses that he has dreamed of such a peaceful family scene for a very long time. The young man eventually makes his way to the gate, bowing politely as he thanks the family for the meal. Irina follows him out, her expression unreadable in the dim light. She suddenly bursts out, her face turning a deep shade of crimson as she demands that he call her by her first name. The request sends Hinata's heart racing, his pulse thumping loudly in his ears. She quickly looks away, her bravado fading into shyness as she explains that while she isn't quite ready for everything, she just needs a little more time. Hinata stands there, stunned by the sudden shift in her demeanor. She eventually composes herself, offering a gentle reminder for him to be careful on his way home. He nods quickly, promising to do so as they share a final, lingering look. She stands by the gate, watching his retreating figure until he disappears from sight, a small, hopeful smile playing on her lips. The woman watches her daughter from the doorway, a knowing look in her eyes as she wonders aloud if the young man will be returning to their home soon. She stands by as the patriarch of the Kamui family makes a solemn vow to Hinata, promising the full weight of their influence to support him in his endeavors. Hinata, humbled by the gesture, admits that he has already received a great deal of assistance from them, while the mother looks on with a warm, approving smile, noting what a fine young man he has become. Following the young man's departure, she pulls her daughter into a tender embrace, reminding her that she is cherished and that seeing her smile again has brought a long-awaited light back into the home. Irina, though still processing the day's events, promises to return to her quarters shortly after a final moment of reflection, and they exchange a quiet goodnight, filled with maternal affection. The heavy silence of the estate is punctuated only by the sharp, mechanical click of a door being securely latched, signaling the end of the day's social obligations. Under the cold glow of the moon, the young woman stands before the stark, modern lines of the family's private sanctuary, the weight of her lineage and the secrets she carries pressing down on her as she prepares to enter her private domain. Her expression hardens into one of quiet resolve, a silent promise to herself that the path ahead, however difficult, is one she must walk with unwavering determination. As she settles into her solitude, a profound shift occurs within her essence, cataloging a formidable array of newly acquired talents. Her mastery now extends to active skills like spatial storage and absolute concealment, bolstered by a suite of passive defenses, ranging from trap immunity to mind-reading resistance, that shield her from the rigors of the trials to come. Hinata stands before the rocky entrance of E-Rank Dungeon 117. He stretches his arms, his face set with a firm resolve. He knows he needs to acquire more skills quickly if he wants to stand on equal footing with Nayu. He approaches the gated entrance where a uniformed guard stands watch. The guard holds out a hand, requesting to see his explorer's license before granting entry. In response, he raises his hand to reveal the mark of his status. The guard's eyes widen in disbelief as the reading confirms a level of 0, a rank unheard of for an active explorer. The guard shakes his head, offering a sympathetic but firm apology. He explains that regulations prohibit a level 0 from entering a dungeon solo, leaving the young man to sigh, having anticipated this rejection. As he turns away, a memory of his recent hardships flashes through his mind, reminding him of the stealth skill he recently acquired. He pauses, contemplating whether this new ability might provide a way past the checkpoint. He focuses his intent, activating the skill with a sudden, silent motion. The guard blinks, looking right through the space where the boy just stood, completely unaware of his presence. He walks calmly past the bewildered sentry, his footsteps light and unheard. It is as if he has become a ghost, invisible to the eyes of those around him. Just as he believes he has made it through, a massive hand clamps down on his shoulder, shattering his concentration. He gasps in shock as a booming laugh erupts from the physically imposing man who has somehow seen through his deception. He demanded to see the boy's palm, his voice booming with irritation as he questioned the absurdity of the situation. The guard, however, remained unfazed, calmly dismissing them once the check was complete. Hinata could only offer a sheepish apology, still reeling from the sudden confrontation. The muscular youth clicked his tongue in annoyance, his brow furrowed as he muttered about the constant interruptions. To him, being delayed for such a low-level dungeon was an insult to his time and strength. As the pair finally crossed the threshold, the guard watched them go with a weary sigh, questioning if every student these days possessed such intense energy. Behind him, the entrance to the dungeon loomed, ready to swallow the newcomers. Upon entering, a familiar mechanical resonance filled Hinata's mind, announcing the activation of a new skill. The system began its analysis, identifying the current location not as the grand castle he expected, but as a place known as Troll's Prison. He looked around in bewilderment, noting that the landscape had shifted entirely since his last visit. The dark, oppressive atmosphere of Lucifer's Fall had been replaced by a more rugged, open terrain, leaving him to wonder why the dungeon's very nature had changed. Suddenly, a round, gelatinous creature bounced into view, its simple eyes fixed on him. Without hesitation, Hinata lunged forward, delivering a swift blow that sent the creature reeling back with a wet thud. The skirmish quickly escalated into a flurry of movement as more of the creatures emerged. Hinata moved with newfound confidence, his strikes landing with precision while his companions cheered from the sidelines, celebrating his effortless victory over the small monsters. After the battle, he picked up one of the surviving creatures, feeling its squishy texture in his hands. A new notification flickered in his vision, confirming he had acquired a monster analysis skill that detailed the creature's name. a call, and its vulnerability to fire. However, his grip proved too strong, and with a sudden pop, the creature disintegrated into a messy splatter. The system chimed again, acknowledging the unintended casualty by granting him a skill called restraint to help him control his overwhelming physical power. He spent the next several minutes practicing this new discipline, carefully cradling the remaining creatures to avoid another accidental burst. Despite his success in keeping them intact, he noted with a hint of disappointment that these particular monsters weren't yielding the magic stones he had hoped to find. He watches in disbelief as a call takes to the air, a sight that prompts his companions to shout in excitement about the rarity of such a creature, urging everyone to take it down immediately. Frustrated by its agility, he swings his blade but misses, prompting a call for a coordinated effort as the creature weaves through their attacks with a sudden, mocking burst of speed. The creature's velocity is staggering, leaving him and the others gaping as it streaks across the sky like a blur of light. Suddenly, a stranger steps into the path of the fleeing monster, gently catching it while chastising the group for their perceived cruelty toward his adorable pet. Before he can even process the stranger's words, the man and the creature vanish into thin air, leaving him standing alone in the clearing with more questions than answers. Far from his bewildered gaze, the small creature lands softly on a wooden pier near a secluded shack, seemingly safe for the moment. He is then violently displaced as the world shifts abruptly, transporting him into the damp, dark confines of a cavern where the distant, desperate voice of his rival echoes through the stone tunnels. He rounds a corner only to find the muscular warrior gasping for breath, cornered by a looming shadow that radiates pure malice. Before he can intervene, a massive troll, identified by his senses as a formidable floor boss, emerges from the darkness with a deafening roar, its presence signaling a dire shift in the dungeon's difficulty. The beast swings a heavy club with bone-crushing force, and despite his strength, the warrior is forced onto the defensive, struggling to withstand the overwhelming power of the monster's assault. He lets out a guttural roar, swinging his massive blade with desperate force as the troll's club smashes into the ground. The impact sends a shockwave through the chamber, forcing the young observer to brace himself against the sudden tremor. While the brute continues his struggle, Hinata's gaze drifts to the side, where the rhythmic clashing of steel and the glow of magic reveal another group engaged in their own fierce battle. A woman in a lab coat-like garment directs her staff toward the fray, her voice carrying over the din as she coordinates her team's movements. He watches as, back in the center of the room, the primary beast bellows a deafening challenge, its massive fist nearly crushing the warrior, who barely manages to parry the blow. Witnessing this coordinated effort for the first time, Hinata marvels at the efficiency of a true party, realizing how quickly they can dismantle such formidable foes. Meanwhile, the lone fighter clicks his tongue in frustration, his boots skidding across the stone floor as he tries to regain his footing against the relentless assault. His attention is pulled back to the immediate danger as a second hulking shadow looms over the warrior, its guttural growl echoing through the hall. The fighter's eyes widen in disbelief, his voice cracking as he demands to know why another monster has joined the fray. Before he can find an answer, a massive club connects with the ground near him, the resulting explosion of debris sending him reeling backward with a pained cry. He gasps for air, his body trembling from the exertion as three of the massive creatures now surround him, their heavy footsteps shaking the very foundation of the dungeon. He curses under his breath, noting that there should only be one boss per party in this area, and wonders aloud who could have been so reckless as to abandon their prey and let them wander into his path. As he falters, a seasoned warrior with a sharp goatee and a confident stride enters the fray, his blade already drawn. He offers a reassuring shout to the younger man, promising his aid as his presence immediately shifts the weight of the battle. The newcomer joins the struggle with a sudden burst of speed, his movements a blur of practiced precision that complements the brute's raw power. Guy acknowledges the assistance with a shout of relief as they begin to push back the tide of monsters, their combined strength creating a momentary opening in the chaotic melee. He seizes the opportunity, delivering a decisive, horizontal slash that carves through the thick hide of the lead troll, sending a spray of dark fluid into the air as the beast begins to falter. He collapsed to his knees, his breath coming in ragged gasps as the adrenaline of the fight finally ebbed away. The veteran warrior approached the battered man, offering a word of thanks for his assistance despite the chaos. Nearby, Hinata watched in silence as they discussed the anomaly. The veteran admitted he had never heard of three bosses appearing at once, questioning if it was even possible for more to manifest than there were parties present. He looked down at the young man, advising him not to overdo it, noting that explorers are only useful as long as they remain alive. The woman in the lab coat added that they would collect the necessary materials before departing, leaving the exhausted warrior to rest before making his own way home. As they walked away, the veteran remarked that while the lone fighter was undeniably tough, training in isolation was proving to be inefficient. He reminded his companion that this world was no game. If one died, everything they had worked for would be lost. Left alone with his thoughts, the muscular warrior gritted his teeth, realizing he had to be prepared for even the most unlikely eventualities if he hoped to survive. Watching from the shadows, Hinata let out a heavy sigh as the weight of the situation settled on him. The logic of the dungeon dictated a strict balance, one boss per party. The presence of a third troll was a glaring error in the natural order, a natural revival, triggered by an unaccounted-for presence. He realized then that the third beast was his responsibility, a consequence of his hidden presence that had caused unnecessary trouble for the others. Steeling his resolve, he he decided it was finally his turn to step into the light and fight. Drawing on his newly acquired martial arts knowledge, he analyzed the creature's movements, identifying the back of the neck as a critical weak point. He calculated his approach, knowing his stealth would break the moment he struck, but confident that a burst of supernatural speed would allow him to land a decisive blow. With a sudden, explosive movement, he launched himself at the towering monster, his leg whipping through the air in a powerful arc aimed directly at the troll's head. He connects with a heavy blow to the creature's neck, but the notification of his stealth deactivating flashes across his mind. With 60 seconds until he can vanish again, he lands and braces himself, watching the massive beast for its next move. Despite the force of the impact, only a faint trail of steam rises from the monster's thick hide. The strike seems to have done little more than singe the surface, leaving the behemoth largely unharmed. The realization hits him like a physical weight. Even with his martial arts skills, his raw power is insufficient to bridge the gap. He stares in disbelief as the beast remains unfazed by his best effort. Rapidly weighing his options, he considers whether to rely on a defense boost to survive a counterattack or to retreat and wait for his stealth to recharge. The risk of pushing forward feels immense as he stands alone in the clearing. Suddenly, a cheerful voice cuts through the tension, asking if he attends Seishin High School. He flinches, his focus shattered by the unexpected presence of a stranger in the middle of the fray. The newcomer, a girl with a bright smile and a playful demeanor, introduces herself without a hint of concern for the danger. He stammers, caught off guard by the fact that someone witnessed his unauthorized entry and his solo struggle against the troll. As the massive creature begins to wobble, she casually pokes its muscular back, insisting that he has already won. With a deafening crash, the beast finally collapses, leaving him standing in stunned silence. She lets out a small huff of air, playfully suggesting that the monster might just be playing dead to trick them. He frantically argues that once such a creature stops moving, the threat is over, but she just laughs at his concern. She finds the idea of a monster using such a clever tactic to be utterly ridiculous. Watching her continue to poke at the fallen giant, he can't help but be struck by her absolute lack of fear. She treats the defeated boss like a mere curiosity, beckoning him over to join her. She watches as he recoils in a fit of panicked shouting, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and confusion at her sudden proximity. To ease his visible distress, she casually lifts the edge of her skirt, revealing that she is wearing protective spats underneath and assuring him there is nothing to be embarrassed about. Seeing him stumble back and shield his eyes in a frantic display of modesty, she can't help but burst into a fit of playful laughter, finding his reaction far more entertaining than expected. He remains intensely flushed, his face burning with embarrassment as he stubbornly refuses to look in her direction, despite her repeated reassurances. In response to his persistent shyness, a mischievous smile spreads across her face as she hums to herself, clearly enjoying the power she has to fluster him. Turning her attention back to the immediate threat, she begins to approach the massive, club-wielding beast that stands ready for combat, its heavy footsteps thumping against the ground. With a sudden, decisive movement, she reaches behind her waist and draws two metallic handles from their holsters, preparing to engage the monster. As she readies her secret weapons, she flashes a confident wink and a grin at him, warning him that what he is about to witness is a secret he must keep for her. Deep within the cavern, the energetic girl approaches the hulking ogre. Her footsteps echo softly against the stone as she closes the distance, her posture relaxed, yet ready for the inevitable clash. Suddenly, she bursts into motion, her form becoming a blur as she lunges toward the beast. From a distance, Hinata watches in stunned silence, barely able to track her rapid movement. He can only gasp at her incredible velocity as she nears the towering creature, her speed far exceeding anything he expected from a fellow explorer. With a fluid, acrobatic motion, she leaps into the air and delivers a devastating spinning kick directly to the ogre's jaw. The impact sends a shockwave through the air before she lands lightly on her feet, her eyes fixed on her target. The massive creature attempts to retaliate, swinging its heavy wooden club in a wide arc, but she is already a step ahead, weaving through the attack with practiced ease. While the beast reels from the impact, Hinata realizes with a start that she isn't just fast, she's wielding a magic weapon. The girl herself seems to sense victory, noting that she is almost at her goal as a brilliant surge of energy erupts from her strike. She doesn't give the beast a moment to recover, unleashing a flurry of glowing strikes that rain down upon the monster. Each hit crackles with power, overwhelming the ogre's defenses in a display of sheer martial prowess. She unleashes the full force of her power, a blinding surge of energy that consumes the monstrous ogre in a brilliant flash. As the light fades, the creature disintegrates into a cloud of dark vapor, leaving the warriors standing alone in the clearing. Panting from the exertion, she turns with a triumphant grin to share the moment, but her expression falters when she realizes the observer has vanished. Unbeknownst to her, Hinata remains shrouded in his perfect stealth ability, desperately hoping to slip away unnoticed while she searches for him. Her eyes narrow as she scans the seemingly empty cavern, certain that she isn't alone despite the silence. With a deliberate step, she begins to pace the ground, her senses heightened as she tries to pinpoint his location. She circles the very spot where he stands invisible, her frustration growing as she commands him to reveal himself and stop hiding. When her demands go unanswered, her bravado crumbles, and her eyes well up with tears as she threatens to burst into a sob if he continues to ignore her. The sound of her soft whimpering and sniffing breaks his resolve, leaving him wide-eyed and panicked by the sudden emotional turn. Forced to concede, he deactivates his stealth and reappears, prompting her to immediately shift from tears to wide-eyed wonder at his mysterious skill. She beams with excitement, marveling at how he managed to erase every trace of his presence so completely. With a mischievous grin, she explains that her ability to find him wasn't luck, but rather a unique gift that makes them perfectly compatible. Leaning in close enough to make him recoil, she observes his flustered expression with amusement. He can only stare back, his face heating up as she invades his personal space. She continues her playful assault, bluntly pointing out that he probably doesn't talk to many people or have many friends. The accuracy of her words hits him like a physical blow, leaving him sputtering in disbelief. Seeing him struggle, she lets out a bright laugh and asks if she's made him angry. He tries to maintain his composure, sweating as he wonders how to handle such an unpredictable person. Her tone shifts slightly as she questions why he chooses to hide his strength, noting that most would be more upset by her prying. She wonders aloud if his secrecy stems from the trouble it would cause if his true abilities were revealed. He narrows his eyes, his expression hardening as he demands to know what her true intentions are. With a radiant smile and an outstretched hand, she makes her proposal. She wants to form a temporary party with him. The suggestion catches him completely off guard, his eyes widening in sheer shock. He weighs his options carefully, realizing that a refusal might lead her to expose his secrets to the world. Despite his confusion over her motives, he concludes that he can manage the situation for now. Finally, he gives a reluctant sigh of agreement, prompting her to leap for joy and celebrate their new partnership. She spreads a checkered cloth over the rocky ground with a flourish, suggesting they settle in and wait for the troll to reappear. Hinata watches her, caught off guard by her casual preparation for a monster encounter. As he observes her, he can't help but wonder about the rarity of her dimensional storage, ability, and the origin of the weapon she produced so effortlessly. Realizing they are still strangers, she invites him to sit beside her, patting the blanket with a cheerful grin as she notes they haven't even exchanged names yet. He introduces himself as Hinata Suzuki, prompting her to respond with equal informality, insisting he simply call her Shino without any stiff honorifics. The conversation shifts to their school life, where she reveals she is a first year in Class 3, while he confirms he is in a different class, explaining why they hadn't crossed paths before. She then brings up the famous Kenny-san, curious if the rumors about the S-rank student in Class 3 are true, to which he provides a quiet confirmation. A competitive glint enters her eyes as she muses about having such a strong rival so close by, leaving him puzzled by her sudden shift in intensity. Their respite is cut short by a thunderous roar as the massive creature respawns. She immediately springs into action, commanding him to wait for an opening while she takes the lead. With a fierce cry, she lunges at the hulking beast, her weapon a blur as she draws its full attention away from her partner. Seizing the moment she created, he darts forward, his blade ready to strike the distracted monster from its blind side. He moves with such blinding speed that Shino can barely track him, her eyes widening in sheer disbelief as he closes the distance to the massive creature in an instant. With a precise, powerful strike, he connects with the beast's head, the impact sending a shockwave through the air as the monster's defenses are shattered. The massive ogre crumples to the ground with a heavy thud, its strength failing instantly under the weight of the blow. Shino watches, frozen in place, as the young warrior lands gracefully nearby, the battle over in a heartbeat. As the dust settles, she can hardly believe the fight is finished, praising his incredible skill with genuine awe. He simply looks down at the fallen monster, realizing that targeting its vital points was even more effective than he had anticipated. When the topic of the monster's remains comes up, he casually offers all the materials to her, mentioning his monster dissection technique. She stammers in surprise, hesitant to accept such a generous share of the spoils from a kill he clearly dominated. Despite the quick victory, she is eager to continue the momentum, suggesting they keep hunting together in this fashion. He seems slightly taken aback by her boundless energy and enthusiasm, but finds himself agreeing to the plan. After some time, they stand amidst the quiet of the dungeon, having successfully gathered a significant haul of materials from their repeated and efficient encounters. Looking toward the exit, she finally suggests that it might be time to head back to the surface, her expression softening as the adrenaline of the hunt begins to fade. She suddenly reaches out, offering her hand and explaining that she'd rather they not be seen by anyone else as they leave the area. He stares at her hand, momentarily confused by the sudden request and the implication of her words. With a radiant, mischievous smile, she tells him she wants him to stay by her side until the very end, ensuring he won't have a chance to slip away or run from their newfound partnership. She continues her playful threat, warning him that if he tries to flee, she will make a scene by crying loudly in front of their entire class. He can only watch in stunned silence as she strides confidently ahead, leaving him with no choice but to follow. Moments later, she playfully grabs his hand, humming a cheerful tune as she leads him along. He follows, still processing the sudden shift in their dynamic and the physical contact she initiated so casually. Once they reach the safety of the mountain's exit, she instructs him to deactivate his stealth ability. With a mischievous grin, she commends his resolve, noting that he actually stayed by her side instead of taking the chance to escape. He finds himself bewildered by her erratic energy, questioning how anyone could keep up with her pace. He mentions that her behavior is strangely familiar, as his own sister often acts in a similar fashion, which catches her completely off guard. As he watches her, he can't help but draw parallels between her exuberant gestures and the joyful spirit of his sibling, finding a strange sense of comfort in the comparison. She shifts the conversation back to their success, marveling at the incredible hiding technique that allowed them to infiltrate the dungeon so effectively. He remains humble, insisting that he is neither exceptionally strong nor even a normal individual by standard measures. She falls silent for a moment, a knowing look crossing her face as she claims to finally understand the nature of his situation, though she keeps her specific realizations to herself. With their current task complete, she boldly proposes a meeting at the E90 location the following day. He is taken aback by the sudden invitation, having assumed their partnership was a one-time occurrence. She leans in close, her face inches from his, and reminds him with a teasing smile that they are now officially a party. The proximity leaves him flustered and barely able to stammer out his agreement. She waves a final goodbye, shouting a reminder not to be late for their 10 o'clock meeting before disappearing into the distance. He stands alone, realizing with a sigh that his quiet life has just become significantly more complicated. He returns to the familiar, imposing architecture of the academy, where the afternoon sun reflects off the glass windows of the modern facility. Inside, he finds himself under the playful scrutiny of Sano-san, who teases him about his obvious struggles with women. Flustered and eager to change the subject, he points out the dirt on his clothes before she asks which dungeon he had ventured into. The mention of his recent destination, the notorious D86, causes her to freeze in genuine shock, her eyes widening as she repeats the name of the dangerous sector. He clenches his fist with a look of fierce determination, vowing to train harder so he never becomes a liability to his comrades. She watches him, deeply impressed by his humility and his ability to keep pace with such a high-level party in a place where so many lose their lives. Recognizing his potential, she decides to explain the fundamental structure of their profession, asking if he is aware of the two primary types of explorers. She details the divide: the maintenance group, who manage established zones, and the conquest group, who focus on reaching entirely new floors. The maintenance group operates within known parameters, utilizing prior information to ensure a lower mortality rate and a more predictable workflow. Conversely, the conquest group must step into the absolute unknown, where the lack of strategy or intelligence means they are constantly walking on the edge of death. She points directly at him, identifying his recent actions as those of a true conquest explorer, a realization that leaves him momentarily speechless. Finally, she reveals the ultimate goal, the explorer ranking. By conquering difficult, unknown floors, explorers can reach the top 10, earning global fame and a secretive, highly coveted special reward. She explains that the special reward is something humans cannot normally achieve, possessing a certain unique effect that sets it apart from any standard prize. The young man listens intently, his curiosity piqued by the gravity of her words. She continues, noting that everyone strives for that top spot in the S rankings, and she believes they are all doing their best to reach that ultimate goal. He remains silent, absorbing the scale of the competition he has entered. Outside, the city looms under the weight of this global competition. Rumors swirl about the current rank 1, a figure so dominant and mysterious that they are considered unsurpassable by any other explorer in existence. By the following day, the weight of these revelations settles on the young man as he sits in his room, pondering the explorer rankings and the recent commotion regarding an unregistered individual suddenly claiming the top spot. Across town, his mentor also finds herself curious about the nature of the special reward and the identity of the person who earned it. While he reflects, she watches the clock tick toward 10 in the morning, wondering if he himself might somehow be entangled in these high-level ranking shifts, hoping to ask him about it when the opportunity arises. At that very moment, he bolts upright in bed, eyes wide with realization as he sees the time. He had promised to meet Shino at 10 o'clock, and with only 15 minutes left, he realizes with a jolt of panic that it will take an hour just to reach their meeting point at E90. Across town at the designated location, the energetic girl waits patiently, a soft smile on her face as she looks out over the greenery, her gaze fixed on a future yet to be revealed while she awaits her friend's arrival. The young swordsman arrives at the forest clearing, breathless but relieved to find he hasn't kept his partner waiting. He calls out to her, glad to have made it in time for their scheduled meeting. She stands amidst the trees, a small white bird fluttering nearby as she prepares for the day's task. She jumps in fright, her face contorting into a mask of pure shock at his sudden greeting. Once the initial scare passes, she huffs with indignation, demanding to know why he didn't show himself sooner instead of sneaking up on her. He can only offer a sheepish laugh and an apology for the unintended surprise. The young woman continues to pout, her cheeks puffed out as she mutters about how someone could possibly evade her notice like that. He ignores the grumbling and looks toward the dense foliage, suggesting they begin their conquest of the area for the day. She suddenly tenses, pointing toward a thicket where she senses the unmistakable presence of a monster. As she beckons him to follow, he watches her with growing curiosity, wondering if she has mastered a specialized skill for searching the perimeter. Emerging from the shadows is a creature that resembles an oversized, predatory squirrel with jagged fur and a menacing glint in its eyes. An analytical insight identifies it as a killer squirrel, noting its vulnerability to wind-based attacks and the potential for it to drop a rare magic stone upon defeat. She grips her staff firmly, her expression shifting to one of focused combat readiness as she proposes they stick to the same strategy they used the previous day. He nods in agreement, bracing himself for the coming skirmish. The beast lets out a high-pitched, aggressive shriek, baring its sharp incisors as it prepares to lunge at the intruders in its territory. It springs forward with surprising speed, a blur of fur and claws aimed directly at them. She doesn't flinch, tracking its movement with a sharp, unwavering gaze. With a powerful swing of her staff, she meets the creature's charge, the impact sending a shockwave through the air. He watches in awe, realizing that her movements are even sharper and more decisive than they were just 24 hours ago. She delivers a devastating blow, the impact sending shockwaves through the air as the creature is struck with overwhelming force. The force of her attack launches the beast backward, its maw agape in a silent cry of defeat, while the young man watches the display of power in stunned silence. Having dispatched the threat with ease, she turns back with a bright, triumphant smile, her energy seemingly boundless despite the skirmish. As they continue their trek through the woods, he reflects on her incredible strength, noting how effortlessly she handles such dangerous foes, while she graciously accepts his praise, offering to share the materials they've gathered. He clenches his fist, feeling a surge of confidence and determination as they push deeper into the dense, rustling foliage. Suddenly, another snarling predator leaps from the brush, its teeth bared in a feral hiss as it attempts a surprise ambush. With a swift motion, he neutralizes the threat, realizing that he is finally finding his rhythm and becoming accustomed to fighting alongside his companion, his confidence growing with every successful encounter. His focus is interrupted when she calls out to him, her eyes wide with excitement as she spots something significant through the trees. She points toward a dark, ominous opening in the earth, identifying it as the threshold to the boss's lair and urging them to prepare for the challenge that awaits within the shadows. While he considers the looming threat of the floor guardian with a grim expression, she playfully seizes his hand and urges him forward into the unknown, her excitement undeterred by the danger ahead. She leads the way into a silent stone chamber, which is centered around a large, ornate circular platform etched into the floor. Standing beside him, she explains that in E90, the boss room entrance relocates to a random spot every time a guardian is slain, which is why they haven't seen other explorers. Eager to proceed, she clings tightly to his arm, pulling him toward the center. He stammers a protest, asking her to give him some space as they prepare to face the unknown. As they step forward, the air grows heavy, and a massive, dark-furred beast manifests before them. This is the floor's guardian, a creature capable of sensing the emotions of its prey, and rumored to carry a rare potion of light. The sheer scale of the wolf-like monster becomes clear as it looms over the pair, its predatory gaze fixed upon them. Hinata realizes with a start that they are finally standing before the true floor boss. Without warning, the beast lunges, its massive jaws snapping at the air where the young man stood only a moment before. He narrowly avoids the initial strike, the creature's snarling face passing inches from him as he begins his countermaneuver. Recalling the lessons from the dungeon guides, the swordsman knows that when a two-person party consists entirely of vanguards, coordination is the only path to survival. Seeing the opening, she draws her weapon with a sharp metallic ring and commands them to split up, circling the beast from both sides to divide its attention. She shouts a final warning over the din of the encounter, reminding him to stay alert. While their strategy remains the same, she adds a terrifying new detail. This particular beast is capable of breathing fire, a revelation that leaves him momentarily stunned. Hinata sprints across the uneven ground, his boots kicking up grit as he narrowly avoids a sweeping gust of force generated by the beast's movement. He leaps into the air, barely clearing the snapping jaws of the massive wolf as it lunges through the swirling dust. The close call forces a sharp, startled gasp from his lungs. Landing amidst the chaos, the young man finds himself separated from his companions by the sheer scale of the creature's aggression. The wolf stands at the center of the clearing, a looming shadow in the haze. Seeing an opening, he cries out Shino's name, his voice strained by the intensity of the battle. Across the field, the elven warrior stands her ground, her weapon gripped firmly as she prepares to intervene. She meets his gaze with a look of fierce determination, her eyes narrowing as she focuses all her energy on the monster before her. With a spirited cry, the warrior charges headlong into the heart of the storm, her silhouette small but resolute against the backdrop of the beast's overwhelming power. The swordsman watches, a brief moment of respite allowing him to witness her brave advance as she closes the distance between herself and the towering guardian. The floor boss reacts instantly, its massive head snapping toward the new threat as it prepares a devastating counterstrike against the approaching elf. It brings a heavy limb crashing down with terrifying speed, the sheer force of the impact threatening to crush the agile warrior beneath its weight. She leaps through the air, narrowly evading the beast's snapping jaws as it lunges with feral desperation. The creature's massive teeth gnash against the empty space where she stood only a heartbeat before. Seeing the opening created by her evasion, Hinata lets out a thunderous roar, his face contorted with the effort of his final charge. He puts every ounce of his strength into the coming strike. The force of the strike is absolute, slamming into the creature's back and driving it into the ground with a bone-shattering impact. Dust and debris explode outward as the Guardian's momentum is violently halted. Watching from the sidelines, Kuna's eyes widen in sheer disbelief at the sudden turn of the tide. The sheer power of the assault leaves her momentarily breathless. A final, eerie glow emanates from the beast's eye before its massive form begins to dissolve into the ether. The light fades, signaling the end of the Guardian's reign. As the dust settles, Kuna erupts in a joyful cheer, celebrating their victory, while Hinata stands breathless, still processing the fact that the Guardian has truly fallen. Shino remains composed, though the intensity of the battle still lingers in the air. He admits his own surprise at how quickly the battle ended once they coordinated their efforts. Kuna agrees, expressing her amazement that they managed to take down such a formidable foe with relative ease compared to their initial struggle. He turns to Shino, offering her the credit for the victory, noting that her distraction was the key. This prompts a playful, knowing smirk from Kuna as she teases him about his humble nature and how he always deflects praise. With the threat neutralized, the group begins to make their way back through the dense forest, the adrenaline of the fight slowly fading into a quiet sense of accomplishment. They pause as they realize the entrance to the boss's chamber has completely vanished from the landscape. Hinata reflects on the sheer luck required to have found the encounter in the first place, as these hidden locations are notoriously difficult to predict. He reflects on the spoils of their victory, noting that while the rare potions dropped by the Giga are legendary for their value, obtaining them is never a simple task. While the group gathers, Kamishiro points out the late hour and mentions her growing hunger, prompting Shino to suggest they head toward the city, a plan Kuna enthusiastically supports. Suddenly, the elf girl lunges forward and clings tightly to his arm, catching him completely off guard. She explains her sudden clinginess by admitting that she would be at a loss if he were to vanish from her sight again, a sentiment that leaves the others watching in silence. Leaving the dense woods behind, the companions begin their trek toward the urban sprawl. During the walk, she looks down and offers a quiet apology in advance for her behavior, leaving him puzzled by her cryptic words. With a bittersweet smile, she vows to do her absolute best, though the weight behind her promise remains unspoken. Upon reaching the bustling city streets, the sight of the elf girl still firmly attached to the young man's arm draws curious glances from the passing crowds. He begins to feel a shift in the atmosphere, noting that her demeanor has changed drastically from the cheerfulness she displayed in the forest to something far more subdued. He finally realizes the depth of her distress when he feels her body shaking. Beneath her quiet exterior, she is gripped by a profound and visible fear. The memory of their first trip to the shopping mall resurfaces, a time when the sheer density of the crowd seemed to suffocate her. It was then that the possibility of a deep-seated trauma involving large groups of people first became apparent. She stares ahead, her pupils dilated with a primal fear as a voice asks what it would take for her to finally find peace. He watches her closely, his brow furrowed with concern as she turns away, unable to meet his gaze. Nearby, their companion is overcome with emotion, tearfully explaining that everyone carries their own scars, and that the weight of one's suffering isn't measured by their outward strength. The young woman offers a quiet apology for her state, but he immediately dismisses it, assuring her that she has nothing to be sorry for. They move away from the bustling main thoroughfare, hoping that the relative quiet of the side streets will allow her racing heart to settle. He gently places a hand on her shoulder to steady her, a small gesture of support as they navigate the urban landscape. While he ponders the true source of her agony, his eyes fall upon her distinct, pointed ears, and a sudden, jarring realization strikes him like a physical blow. The cacophony of the city streets begins to swell again, and she clutches her head, the overlapping voices and ambient noise becoming an unbearable, physical pressure. She collapses into a crouch, desperately covering her ears as the sound reverberates through her mind, confirming his suspicion that her heightened senses are turning the world into a torture chamber. He reaches out, his hand moving toward her sensitive elven ear as she looks up with wide, tear-filled eyes. The sudden proximity catches her off guard, her pupils dilating in surprise while he maintains a steady, worried gaze. Opening his palm, he reveals a pair of small, dark earbuds and asks her how she has managed to cope with the city's cacophony until now. His expression shifts to one of self-reproach as he demands to know why she hadn't been using them to protect herself. She hesitates, her hands hovering near her face as she admits that she simply wanted to experience the walk and hear his voice without any barriers. This confession leaves him momentarily speechless, his eyes widening as the weight of her sacrifice for their shared moment sinks in. Moving with newfound gentleness, he carefully fits the devices into her ears, the small clicks signaling the return of silence. He bows his head slightly, offering a sincere apology for his lack of awareness, while she can only offer a soft, tearful response. Looking up at him, the overwhelming pain in her eyes begins to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of gratitude. These were no ordinary earphones designed for music or calls. They were specialized tools crafted specifically to block out the world and grant her peace. She stands in silence, the weight of the world's noise still a barrier between them. Hinata watches her, realizing that despite the earbuds, his words are failing to bridge the gap. He wonders if it would be better to leave things as they are if his presence only causes her more pain. Because of this growing distance, he stares at her back, acutely aware of the invisible wall separating their worlds. He feels a desperate urge to help her, to find some way to truly reach her through the silence. Recalling Kamashiro's strength and how she protected others from the cold, he grits his teeth, sweat beading on his forehead. He demands of himself what he can possibly do to match that kind of resolve, while Kuna watches his internal struggle with growing concern. In a moment of raw desperation, he reaches out, his voice a silent plea for help. He begs for the strength to break through, for any power that might allow him to connect with the girl standing right in front of him. Suddenly, a familiar voice resonates within him, thanking him and calling him partner. In that instant, a new realization takes hold. He has acquired the skill of telepathy, a bridge built of pure thought. With this new power, he turns his gaze back to the elven girl, who remains lost in her own quiet sorrow. He softly calls her name, not with his lips, but with his mind. She gasps, her eyes widening in pure shock as his voice rings clearly in her head. Confused and overwhelmed, she searches for the source, only to hear him tell her that such a sad expression doesn't suit her. She realizes that amidst the muffled world, his is the only voice she can hear. Overcome by the sudden, intimate connection, she lunges forward, throwing her arms around him in a desperate embrace. The sudden impact catches him off guard, his eyes wide as she clings to him. She buries her face in his chest, the dam finally breaking as she sobs uncontrollably. He looks down at her, his expression softening with a mixture of relief and empathy as he holds her close. As they stand locked in the embrace, the irony of their situation becomes clear. The very tools meant to protect her from the world had isolated her. But through this new bond, they have finally found a way to truly be together. She had been trapped in a world of silence, a solitary existence where no one could reach out to support her. For so long, she had carried the weight of her isolation alone, unable to rely on anyone else to share the burden of her thoughts. As he gently rests his hand on her head, he wonders if this connection is truly what she desired, even if the form it took was unexpected. His contemplation is broken when she softly calls his name, her voice finally reaching him through the mental link they now share, while their companions watch from a respectful distance. The elven girl's composure completely shatters, her face contorting as a flood of raw emotion escapes in a messy display of tears and gratitude. She struggles to find her voice, the words of thanks catching in her throat as the dam of her long-held loneliness finally breaks under the weight of his kindness. She lunges forward, burying her face against his chest as she repeats her thanks over and over, her body trembling with the force of her relief. He stands there, slightly taken aback by the intensity of her outburst, yet he remains a steady anchor for her in this moment of profound connection, acknowledging that they are now truly linked. The story shifts to a grand, imposing structure, the heart of military operations. Inside, a seasoned commander with a thick beard and a decorated cap broods over a difficult situation. He contemplates the infinite magic stone, frustrated that a suitable buyer has yet to be found despite its immense value. This rare artifact, a shimmering gem nestled within a protective case, is the source of his concern. He marvels at the fact that such a powerful object was even discovered, knowing the weight of the secret it carries. Turning to his subordinates in the secure briefing room, he asserts that there is no safer place in the world than Japan for such a discovery. He believes their current isolation provides a necessary shield against external interference. As the discussion continues, he notes that Japan currently boasts two of the highest-ranked individuals in the world, a fact that bolsters his confidence in their security. The atmosphere in the room is heavy with the gravity of their political standing. However, his composure breaks when he learns of a new development. He is stunned to hear that both the Kagura and Kamishiro families have already made formal offers to purchase the stone. Realizing the information has leaked, he slams his fist onto the table in a fit of rage, his face contorted with fury. He bellows at his subordinates, cursing the idiots who would dare leak classified military secrets to their own families, compromising the entire operation. Amidst his outburst, a young officer named Jin and a woman named Akari engage in a heated exchange. Jin challenges her, but she remains firm, reminding him of the vital support their organization receives from the Kamishiro family and the necessity of maintaining these ties. Their argument intensifies as the young officer claims his family's long history grants them superior rights to the information. His opponent refuses to back down, insisting that the stone must be returned to the Zerotech Divine Vault, while the commander watches the internal friction with growing irritation. He continues to vent his frustration, his voice rising as he emphasizes the dire consequences of their situation. Nearby, Puna watches the unfolding drama with a look of quiet concern, sensing the deep-seated tensions within the high command. Ignoring his outburst, she looks away, her expression clouded with a mix of duty and personal sorrow. She speaks of a sister who is forced into isolation, expressing a simple, heartbreaking wish for her to at least be able to walk freely within the confines of their family's estate. She knew the stakes were high, that singular, jagged crystal held the power to change everything. Her family was prepared to pay any price, no matter how exorbitant, to secure the infinite magic stone and the possibilities it promised. Her resolve was met with sharp skepticism as Jin questioned if she was truly serious. Without a flicker of doubt, she confirmed her intent, explaining that if this stone could offer even a glimmer of hope for her sister's life, her own existence was a small price to pay, a sentiment that left the young officer stunned by her desperation. The tension between them snapped, erupting into a fierce, shouting match as they challenged one another to settle the matter then and there. Their voices clashed with the intensity of a physical blow until a thunderous command to wait echoed through the room, cutting through their aggression. He stood before them, his presence imposing as he warned that a duel between two of the nation's greatest assets would only end in one of them being permanently sidelined. Such a loss of military power was a scenario he refused to entertain, his gaze locking onto them with unwavering authority. Narrowing his eyes, the commander issued a chilling ultimatum. If they chose to act on their selfish impulses, he would personally ensure the magic stone was cast into the deepest depths of the ocean, where no one could ever claim it. Having silenced the room, he settled back into his seat, musing that since a cellar existed, there was still a chance for a diplomatic resolution. He suggested that another possibility might emerge, one that didn't require the destruction of their ranks. The two elite explorers, the third-ranked Jin and the second-ranked Akari, could only seethe in silence as their superior ordered them to remain still. He declared that he would find a way for both of their powerful families to obtain what they sought, but until then, they were to suppress their hostility. They stand before the entrance of a bustling cafe. Shino, her energy seemingly boundless, points toward the establishment with a wide, infectious grin, insisting that they go inside. Hinata follows her lead, noting how much more vibrant and lively she has become compared to their earlier, more somber moments. Upon entering, the chime of a bell announces their arrival, and they are immediately greeted by a polite waitress behind the counter. Shino's excitement doesn't wane as she takes in the atmosphere, her eyes bright with anticipation for what the menu might offer. She leans in close to the menu, her enthusiasm overflowing as she makes her selection with a joyful shout. Hinata watches her, slightly taken aback by the sheer volume of her voice and the intensity of her delight, wondering if she has always been this expressive. As the order is placed, the waitress recites a long, rhythmic name for the dish that sounds more like a magical spell than a simple food item. Hinata can only blink in confusion, his mind struggling to process the complex incantation required just to get a snack. Moments later, a towering, ornate drink topped with swirls of cream and colorful garnishes is placed before them. Shino beams at the sight, declaring that this was exactly what she had been craving. She takes a large, satisfied bite, her expression one of pure bliss. Between mouthfuls, she admits that she had always wanted to share a treat like this with someone else, her usual stoicism completely replaced by genuine happiness. Encouraged by her reaction, Hinata takes a sip of his own drink and is instantly hit by an explosion of flavor. He is stunned, realizing that the incantation mentioned earlier wasn't just for show. There is a tangible, almost magical quality to the sweetness that heightens the entire experience. Shino watches him with a knowing smile, asking if it isn't the most delicious thing he's ever tasted. She seems to take as much pleasure in his surprise as she does in the drink itself, the tension of their previous trials momentarily forgot. Observing her in this lighthearted state, he finds himself thinking that her current behavior is remarkably similar to his younger sister's. He remains quiet, lost in the comparison as he watches her enjoy the moment. However, his internal thoughts are cut short when she suddenly turns to him with a sharp, defensive glare. She warns him sternly not to compare her to his sister, her sudden shift in mood catching him completely off guard and leaving him stammering in surprise. She finishes her drink with a satisfied sigh, the tension from their earlier exchange seemingly evaporated. Hinata watches her, relieved to see her back to her usual, albeit intense, self. Suddenly, she springs to her feet, the chair scraping against the floor as she seizes his arm with surprising strength. He is caught off guard by her sudden burst of energy. Declaring that their time is limited, she drags him out of the cafe, her eyes sparkling with excitement for the next destination. He can barely keep up with her brisk pace as they head back into the bustling city. The rest of the day passes in a blur of activity. They visit a game center where they win a collection of stuffed animals, their laughter echoing through the neon-lit aisles. As evening falls, they walk through the city streets, the atmosphere between them growing more comfortable and intimate. Their journey eventually leads them to the gates of a sprawling, Gothic-style mansion that looms over the neighborhood. Hinata stands frozen in disbelief as she casually announces that they have reached her home. He stares at the massive estate, his mind racing as he compares this opulence to Kamashiro's residence. The sheer scale of the Kagura family's wealth is overwhelming, leaving him momentarily speechless. As they reach the ornate iron gates, she suddenly stops, her shoulders slumping as a somber mood takes hold. Noticing the change, he asks her what is troubling her. With a pained expression, she whispers that she has no desire to return inside those walls. He gently counters her, reminding her that her parents are likely worried, and that she cannot simply stay out all night. His gaze falls upon the prominent nameplate near the entrance, which reads Kagura. The realization hits him that her full name is Shino Kagura, and he questions why she had kept her prestigious family name a secret until now. She explains that her family is one of the great houses, a powerful conglomerate of martial artists and business interests on par with the Kamashiro family. Her expression remains clouded, suggesting that the weight of her lineage is a burden she carries with great difficulty. She stands before the imposing iron gates of her family estate, her voice soft as she admits her fear that her lineage might change how he sees her. She confesses that his kindness has been a comfort and asks that they continue to treat each other as they always have, regardless of the wealth and status her name carries. Her fingers tighten around the cold metal bars of the gate as she looks down, softly uttering his name with a heart heavy with unspoken worries. Breaking the heavy silence, she looks up and asks with a hint of vulnerability if he will still spend time with her in the future. He doesn't hesitate for a second, his face breaking into a warm, reassuring smile as he promises that he certainly will. To further ease her mind, he reminds her of the bond they share, pointing out that they are members of the same party and that such a connection isn't easily broken by social standing. The statement catches her off guard, her eyes widening in surprise at his simple but profound loyalty. The tension finally dissolves into a radiant, genuine smile. With a joyful exclamation of agreement, she stands before her grand home, no longer burdened by the shadow of her name, but emboldened by the strength of their friendship. The bustling purchase center E117 stands as a hub of activity, its wide halls filled with people going about their business in the heart of the facility. A young man walks through the crowd and notices a guard in a cap watching him intently, which sparks a moment of quiet confusion and unease. He suddenly realizes the sheer number of military personnel stationed throughout the facility, their presence heavy and unexplained as they linger in every corridor. His attention is drawn to a large monitor displaying a specific, jagged crystal with an urgent message. Anyone holding such a stone must report it immediately to the authorities. A cold sweat breaks out on his brow as he recognizes the object. It is the exact same type of special magic stone he had sold just recently for the staggering sum of 300,000 yen. Sensing the guard's gaze burning into the back of his head, he quickens his pace, his mind racing with the terrifying possibility that he has already been marked as a person of interest in a military investigation. In that moment of peak anxiety, a strange clarity washes over him as a new skill, poker face, takes hold, forcing his features into a mask of perfect, unnatural calm despite the turmoil within. He approaches the service counter with a steady hand, determined to offload his remaining monster materials and vanish from the center before his luck runs out. Scanning the price list, he notes the varying values of hides and fangs, observing that materials from certain beasts like the kuna and jige fetch a much higher price than others, even when they are of the same range. His eyes widen in shock when he sees a common, tiny magic stone listed for a mere 1,000 yen, a staggering contrast to the massive sum he received for his own find, confirming just how rare his previous discovery truly was. He stares at the display, noting the modest 3,000 yen price for a common small magic stone. A flicker of doubt crosses his mind as he wonders if the market value for his own find has plummeted. The screen flickers, revealing a staggering figure, 150 million yen for a single Delta magic stone. Because of this revelation, his heart hammers against his ribs as he counts the zeros in disbelief, questioning if the machine has malfunctioned once again. Passers-by move through the facility, oblivious to the young man's internal turmoil. He breaks into a cold sweat, the gravity of the situation finally sinking in. The military's urgent search for the Delta Stone wasn't just a routine inquiry. It was a hunt for a fortune he had unknowingly held in his hands. Moments later, he retreats from the terminal, his mind racing with the terrifying implications of his discovery. He resolves to sell off his remaining common materials and vanish into the safety of his home before he draws any more unwanted attention. Later that evening, the tension of the day begins to fade as Kuna leans back with a satisfied sigh, patting her stomach after a hearty meal. She suddenly realizes she forgot to order dessert, while he sits across from her, still feeling the lingering effects of the day's stress. He reflects on how his specialized skills help him maintain composure and suppress his physical needs during high-pressure situations. As the meal winds down, she asks about his activities for the day, prompting him to mention his excursion to the E90 floor. The news surprises her, as she remarks on the difficulty of that particular area due to its poor visibility and the challenge of locating the boss. She notes that despite these hurdles, the materials found there are surprisingly lucrative compared to higher-ranked dungeons. He explains his reasoning, noting that the oversaturation of hunters in D-ranked dungeons has driven down the price of materials. For someone looking to level up and earn a steady income, the less popular E90 floor offers a strategic advantage that many overlook. He ponders his next move, deciding to frequent the E90 floor for a while in hopes of securing more potions to bolster his supplies. Since his enrollment 3 weeks ago, time has moved in a blur of activity. As he walks through the school grounds, the usual bustle of student life surrounds him, but a sudden shout for Kamishiro-san cuts through the noise and draws his attention. Nearby, a group of students begins to whisper excitedly, their eyes fixed on a figure in the distance. They exchange rumors with hushed intensity, wondering if the stories they've heard about her are actually true. They are oblivious to his watchful eyes as he realizes exactly who they are talking about, the one known as the Ice Princess. He sees Kamishiro walking with a stoic, unreadable expression, her presence commanding a chilling respect that silences the surrounding chatter. The students continue to whisper about her, noting how perfectly the nickname, Ice Princess, fits her, given her aloof demeanor and her reputed mastery over ice-based abilities that set her apart from the rest of the student body. She is met with his cold, focused gaze, as he observes her from a distance with a hardening expression that betrays a deep, unspoken intent. Approach the academy gates, his expression neutral as he blended into the morning flow of students. The familiar architecture of the school grounds loomed ahead, a place where his status was already well defined by the whispers of his peers. As he walked, a familiar voice called out, filled with genuine surprise. The young woman with the dark headband stopped in her tracks, her eyes widening as she recognized him among the crowd, her greeting catching him off guard. She couldn't help but notice a subtle shift in his demeanor. He seemed more composed, perhaps even stronger than when they had last met. He offered a polite greeting in return, his voice steady despite the weight of her curious observation. Together, they continued toward the main building, though the atmosphere around them grew increasingly heavy. The presence of the Ice Princess walking alongside him drew the attention of every passerby, sparking a wave of hushed conversations. They could hear the murmurs becoming more pointed as they moved through the halls, with students openly questioning why someone labeled as level 0 was even permitted to walk these grounds. He kept his gaze forward, ignoring the derogatory comments that trailed in his way. Nearby, a group of upperclassmen watched the pair with undisguised hostility. Their leader, a young man with a volatile temperament, narrowed his eyes, his posture radiating a clear threat toward the newcomer who dared to stand out. They continued to stare as the pair entered the classroom, where the scrutiny only intensified, with every pair of eyes fixed on them as they took their seats. He realized then that his presence was causing a stir, and he briefly considered whether adjusting his morning schedule might be necessary to avoid such unwanted attention. His thoughts were interrupted when he noticed a figure already seated at the back of the room, watching him with a predatory intensity. The air in the room seemed to chill as their eyes met across the rows of desks. The stranger, a young man with sharp, light-colored hair and a cold, calculating gaze, didn't look away. His expression was one of pure, focused aggression, marking him as a formidable new obstacle in the path ahead. He lunges forward, his hand clamping down firmly on the boy's wrist with a sharp, aggressive motion. He barks out a greeting, his face twisted in a mocking sneer as he corners his target in the quiet hallway while Hinata realizes this is happening because his usual companion is gone. He watches as the bully leans in until they are nearly nose to nose, taunting him about his sudden closeness with the girl known as the Ice Princess. He watches with a smirk as Hinata's gaze drops in defeat, the insult regarding the level 0 status hanging in the air while the boy's eyes narrow behind his bangs. He lets his mind drift to the girl in question, a figure the Academy sees as a frozen statue devoid of any warmth. He sets his jaw in a hard line of defiance, clenching his fist as he feels the heat of indignation rising within him. He speaks up, his voice steady despite the tension, asserting that he has seen the genuine smiles and the depth of emotion she hides. He lets his defense turn into a passionate roar, demanding to know how someone who has never seen her effort could dare to judge her. He warns the other with a final, thunderous command never to use that derogatory nickname again, his fury triggering the awakening of a crushing new presence. His presence is so overwhelming that the once confident attacker recoils with a pale, sweat-slicked face, paralyzed by the sheer intensity of the pressure. He recoils, the weight of the intimidation skill pressing down on him like a physical blow. His breath hitches as he struggles to maintain his composure against the overwhelming aura radiating from the young man before him. Snapping back into a state of blind rage, the bully roars at his opponent, demanding to know why a piece of trash like him is acting like some kind of hero. His face is contorted with a mix of humiliation and fury as he tries to reclaim his dominance through sheer volume. With a sudden, violent motion, he lunges forward, throwing a desperate punch aimed directly at the source of his frustration. The strike is met with a swift evasion, as the two combatants lock eyes in a moment of high-stakes tension. One is fueled by chaotic anger, the other by a cold, newfound clarity that allows him to see every movement with agonizing precision. Seeing the lethal intent in the attack, Kuna screams out Hinata's name, her voice cracking with fear as the confrontation reaches a boiling point in the middle of the hallway. A silent, heavy gaze passes between the rivals, the air thick with the unspoken realization that the power dynamic between them has shifted irrevocably. Desperate to prevent a tragedy, she pleads with the aggressor to stop, her eyes welling with tears as she begs him not to kill her friend. Her intervention breaks the trance of the combatants, forcing a pause in the violence. He clicks his tongue in disgust, dismissing her as a mere pest before turning his back on the pair. Hinata pulls her close, his expression unreadable as he shields her from the retreating threat, his mind still racing from the encounter. As the bully stomps away, still muttering curses about trash standing out, Hinata stands frozen. A dark, chilling thought flickers through his mind. For a split second, he had truly intended to kill the man who just threatened them, a realization that leaves him questioning his own nature. The distance between them grows as the antagonist departs, leaving the two students alone in the hallway to grapple with the aftermath of the sudden, violent encounter. He delivers a swift, decisive blow, his arm extending with a force that leaves no room for retaliation. The impact sends his opponent crashing to the floor, where the defeated youth groans in agony, clutching his side as the weight of the defeat sinks in. Looking down at his hands, the young warrior is visibly shaken, his breath hitching as he realizes the sheer scale of the power he just unleashed. Meanwhile, the fallen Kim Yui can only let out a strangled cry of pain, unable to comprehend how a simple strike could cause such devastation. As the defeated boy remains hunched over on the cold floor, Kuna gently nudges her companion, suggesting they leave the scene behind. He glances back one last time, his expression unreadable, while Kim Yui seethes with a mixture of physical pain and burning humiliation, his pride shattered by the encounter. In the wake of the conflict, a complex array of newly acquired skills and status updates flickers into existence, marking a significant leap in the young man's growing capabilities. Kuna's voice trembles as she confronts Hinata, her eyes brimming with tears. She asks him directly if he truly intended to take a life just moments ago. Hinata, caught off guard, can only stare back in stunned silence, the weight of his actions beginning to sink in. Her gaze remains fixed on him, her expression a mixture of heartbreak and disbelief. The silence between them stretches, heavy with the unspoken consequences of the violence that nearly unfolded. He finally finds his voice as they stand together in the quiet hallway. He admits that while their time together has been short, he knows she isn't the type of person to resort to such extremes. He explains that in that moment of chaos, he felt he had no choice. If he hadn't struck first, he surely would have been the one to fall. His thoughts drift back to the confrontation with Kim Yui and the stinging humiliation he felt. He clarifies that his intent wasn't purely murderous, but the need to defend himself against such a relentless foe had pushed him to the brink. She suddenly lunges forward, gripping his shoulders and shouting his name to break his spiral of guilt. He looks down, his voice a mere whisper as he struggles to find the words to explain the darkness he felt. Their intense moment is interrupted by a familiar voice calling out from down the corridor. Kamishiro approaches them, her presence shifting the heavy atmosphere of the hallway. The newcomer introduces herself with a polite bow, though her eyes are sharp as she observes the pair. Kuna stands her ground, her expression hardening as she sizes up the girl who has just arrived. A sudden, electric tension crackles between the two young women as they lock eyes. Hinata stands between them, completely bewildered by the sudden shift from a somber conversation to this silent, competitive standoff. Neither girl backs down, their glares intensifying as they silently challenge one another. The air in the room feels thick with a new kind of conflict, one that Hinata is clearly unprepared to navigate. Eventually, the tension breaks as they settle onto the floor to talk. Kamishiro remarks that from her perspective, it looked as though Kuna was the one bullying Hinata. This accusation sends Kuna into a defensive flurry, as she indignantly insists she was only acting out of genuine concern for him. She looks toward the young man with a mix of concern and suspicion, questioning the motives of the one they call Kimui. Her voice carries a weight of worry that even the stoic youth cannot ignore, as she wonders if the threat is truly as significant as it seems. As they stand in the quiet corridor, the silver-haired girl absorbs the weight of the conversation, acknowledging the strange circumstances that have brought them together in this place of learning and conflict. Turning her full attention to him, she admits there is something she has been meaning to ask, her expression softening into one of genuine curiosity as she searches his eyes for an honest answer. She poses a startling question, asking if he truly considers himself weak, before reminding him of their first encounter with the massive troll. She points out a detail others might have missed. The beast fell from a single, precise strike, a feat far beyond the capabilities of an ordinary student, suggesting his power is far greater than he lets on. He attempts to brush off the observation, claiming he simply struck a vulnerable spot by chance, but the dark-haired girl beside him isn't convinced, noting that such precision and timing are anything but common for someone of their standing. Sensing a deeper secret, the energetic girl leans in close, her eyes sparkling with intensity as she asks the silver-haired student if she is aware of his hidden, extraordinary talent that sets him apart from everyone else in the academy. She brings up the mysterious way he seems to vanish from perception, causing the other girl to tremble with a mix of embarrassment and defensive modesty, insisting it was nothing of importance and certainly not a special ability. The revelation leaves the silver-haired girl wide-eyed and breathless, her mind racing to process the impossible nature of what she just heard regarding his elusive presence. Observing the confusion, the girl with the bow explains her unique perspective, wondering aloud why his presence is so distinct to her ears when he remains a ghost to everyone else, questioning if there is something fundamentally different about his soul. She reveals the true nature of her gift, an S-rank latent ability that allows her to perceive every vibration in the air, translating sounds into a map of human emotion and physical well-being, making it impossible for anyone to hide their true state from her. She watches him with concern as he stands silently, his mind drifting back to a previous encounter. He recalls Jin's abrasive voice, remembering how the other boy had mockingly questioned if his next target was the insect princess. He grits his teeth, his expression darkening as a surge of frustration boils over. With a sharp, pained exclamation, he declares his utter hatred for the situation and the cruel labels being tossed around. Turning back to his companions, he vents his anger at the heartless nicknames given to them. He laments how people speak so carelessly, judging and labeling them without understanding the reality of who they truly are. He continues, his voice trembling with conviction as he describes Shino's kindness and Kamui's hidden depth as a hardworking, family-oriented man who feels emotions deeply. Clenching his fist, he vows that he cannot stand by while such good people are wounded by the thoughtless, insensitive words of others. Hyuna leans in close to the young man, her voice playful as she teases him about his sour mood. She wonders aloud what could have possibly made him so cross, while Shino watches the exchange from a short distance away. Nearby, the elf woman lets out a bright, genuine laugh, her eyes crinkling with mirth. She admits that having someone like him get angry on her behalf isn't such a bad feeling after all, a sentiment that leaves Kamishiro momentarily speechless. The two women share a moment of quiet warmth, their smiles reflecting a newfound bond. While one radiates a cheerful energy, the other offers a soft, supportive expression, both focused on the companion sitting before them. Despite the light-hearted atmosphere, he remains lost in his own thoughts, his gaze fixed firmly on the floor. The weight of his internal struggle is etched into the lines of his face, a stark contrast to the joy surrounding him. Breaking the silence, he begins to speak, his voice heavy with a long-buried truth. He explains to his companions that unlike them, he possesses no S-rank potential. In fact, he has been stuck at level 0 since the very day he was born. This revelation hangs in the air, drawing stunned and concerned looks from both women. They listen intently, sensing the deep-seated pain behind his confession. He reflects on the harsh labels that have defined his life, remembering the voices that claimed he could never become an explorer. Despite the eternal level 0 brand burned into his reputation, he had pushed himself to the limit, training his body and mind in a desperate bid to prove his worth. He had hoped that entering this academy would finally free him from the judgmental eyes of others and offer a fresh start. However, seeing the arrogance of those like Kimui only served as a bitter reminder that his circumstances remained unchanged. A surge of resentment boils over as he clenches his fist, his knuckles whitening with the strain. He questions why he alone must carry this burden, why the stigma of being powerless follows him no matter how hard he tries to escape it. Sensing his spiraling despair, Kamishiro reaches out, her hand coming to rest gently on his arm. She calls his name softly, her touch a silent anchor intended to pull him back from the brink of his own bitterness. She speaks with a soft but firm voice, telling him that even if he feels that way, she is happy. She explains that because he came to this school, she was finally able to reach out and touch another person's heart. Continuing her heartfelt confession, she takes his hands in hers, her smile widening. She credits him with giving her the strength to smile at her mother again, becoming far stronger than she ever was before, all because he was by her side. As he listens, a profound realization washes over him. He reflects on his deep-seated desire for someone to acknowledge his presence and the meaning of his life, not just as a brother or a son, but for who he truly is. Seeing his companion's supportive faces, the weight of his isolation begins to lift. Tears of relief and joy stream down his face as he finally feels seen. The simple acknowledgement from someone else is the validation he has craved for so long, and a genuine smile breaks through his sorrow. The intensity of the moment leaves him momentarily overwhelmed, his hands trembling slightly as the emotional dam finally breaks. His companions don't stop there. They offer their own gratitude in return. One thanks him for the warmth he brought into her life, while the other expresses her thanks for him reaching out to her when she needed it most. Standing together in the quiet hallway, the three of them share a moment of profound connection. The air between them is no longer heavy with unspoken burdens, but light with mutual understanding. Looking at them, he can't help but think that despite his own struggles, these two must have endured far greater hardships than he could imagine. He beams at them, his face flushed with genuine happiness. He tells them that he is the one who should be grateful, thanking them from the bottom of his heart for being so kind to someone like him. However, his self-deprecation is immediately met with a playful but firm rebuke. One of them points a finger at him, declaring such talk strictly forbidden, leaving him startled by her sudden energy. She continues her playful reprimand, declaring that any further self-pity from him is strictly prohibited. Her companion joins in, expressing her own dissatisfaction with his attitude and insisting that he stop being so hard on himself, leaving him startled by their sudden, united front of concern. Leaning in close enough for him to feel her breath, the blonde girl insists that being called by her formal name is no longer acceptable. Her intensity catches him off guard, forcing him to lean back as she demands a more personal connection, her face just inches from his own. She watches him stammer, his heart beginning to race as she questions why he won't address her more familiarly, especially since he already does so with their companion. The pressure of her gaze and the proximity of her face send his pulse skyrocketing, a fact that does not go unnoticed by the others. He watches as they share a light-hearted laugh at his expense. Their previous tension completely vanished. They seem to have reached a silent agreement about how to handle his awkwardness, leaving him blinking in confusion at the sudden, cheerful shift in the atmosphere. She sees an opportunity for further mischief and suggests a compromise. Since both their names share similar sounds, perhaps a cute nickname like Hina-chan would be appropriate for him. The suggestion is met with immediate interest, further complicating his attempts to remain composed. Her companion beams with pure delight at the suggestion, her eyes sparkling as she agrees that the nickname is perfect. The idea of such an informal and affectionate title seems to thrill her, and she encourages him to accept it with an enthusiastic shout. She watches as the young man's internal state falls into total disarray, his heart thumping audibly against his ribs as he tries to process the new dynamic. A deep crimson flush creeps up his neck as he tentatively tests the name under his breath, his usual stoicism completely dissolved by their affection. He utters the name, and hearing it, she finds herself suddenly overcome with a wave of shyness, her hands flying to her face to hide her own rising blush. She flees in embarrassment as the scene dissolves into chaotic laughter, with Shino pointing out that his heart rate has reached dangerous levels. Despite the teasing, the bond between the three has clearly deepened into something warm and genuine.